all began with actor Charles Tolson, who was the owner of the Tolson Stock Company, which was a travelling acting troupe. The troupe had just finished a week of performances at the King Opera House in September 1903, and they were headed out of town to go to another performance. They headed to the train station, and when Tolson made his way to the ticket window, someone called out his name. Dr. William Parman, a well-known local doctor, emerged and shot Tolson with his revolver. Tolson was shot in the hip and the chest, and he was taken to the Fort Smith Hospital, but it was too late, and he died from his injuries. Dr. Parchman's motive for the incident was that he believed his 17-year-old daughter was in love with Tolson, was planning on running away with him, even though Tolson was married and his wife was a member of the acting troupe. Tolson knew Dr. Parchman and his daughter Allie, but there was no proof that he had any intention of eloping with the girl. Parchman was acting based on the information given to him by a vinegar salesman who may have had an interest in the young girl. Parchman was found not guilty of the murder despite there being multiple witnesses. Interestingly, both Allie and the vinegar salesman left town and were not present for the trial. It's said that Tolson's ghost haunts the King Opera House, which was the location of his last performance. Today, the Opera House is a contributing property to the Van Buren Historic District, listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It isn't currently open to the public, but is available to be rented out. In at number 4, we have Tollgate Mounds. The Tollgate Mounds is a famous historical site in Arkansas and is a National Historic Landmark, one of 4 in the Arkansas State Park system, and this park is the largest and most complex mound site in the state. Arkansas was once the home of a group of people referred to as the Plum Bayou culture by archaeologists and historians. Their existence in the area is a bit of a mystery. These people were not related to the Toltec tribes from Mexico, despite the site's name. The Plum Bayou culture also cannot be traced to any other group of people living in the area when the tribe was active. A total of 18 mounds have been identified in the area, all built between 650 and 1050 AD. One mound stands 49 feet high and another at 39 feet, with many smaller mounds surrounding it. The site was abandoned around 1050 AD and no remnants of the residents exist outside of the Toltec Mounds. Today, the site is still an active archaeological site in the home of Toltec Mounds Archaeological State Park. As for hauntings at the site, if an entire culture disappearing without a trace isn't creepy enough, many visitors to the site have reported the appearance of lights or orbs near the mounds, seeing ghosts and hearing footsteps around the site at night. Many of these findings have been caught on camera and video, and so many paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, and haunting enthusiasts have confirmed there is activity in the area. Whether it's from the Lost Society or not, we may never know. The mounds are open daily for visitors, with tours available to learn more about the history and hauntings in the area. In at number 3, we have the Allen House. The Allen House was built back in 1905 and was named after the original owner, Joe Lee Allen, where he lived in the home with his family for many years. Although Joe died in 1917, his wife Caddy stayed in the home with the 3 children Laddle, Lonnie, Lee, and Lewis. Sadly, Laddle took his own life in one of the bedrooms by drinking potassium cyanide, and it was unknown for many years for why she did it. After her death, her mother Caddy Allen kept the room completely closed off from the rest of the house. When Caddy passed in 1954, the property was split into rental apartments, and soon after renters moved in, they reported hearing footsteps and moans from the bedroom where Laddle died. In 1985, new owners bought the house and opened the bedroom, and it still contained the bottle of cyanide in a closet. The house changed owners twice, and in 2007, Mark and Rebecca Spencer purchased the Allen House and had a complete paranormal investigation done in 2008 because of the endless unexplainable instances. The investigators recorded over 40 voice phenomena and had their own paranormal experiences throughout their investigation. On August 22, 2009, Laddle's love letters were discovered in the attic floor. Over 90 letters detail her 1948 love affair, which ended with her taking her own life on Christmas night. After the owner Mark had experienced endless amounts of paranormal activity and discovering Laddle's love letters, he wrote a book called A Haunted Love Story. Nowadays, the home can be booked for tours explaining the history and the paranormal activity that goes on in the Allen House. During the Halloween season, it's open to the public from 6 to 11 p.m. for tours, and paranormal investigators and ghost lovers flock to hopefully experience Laddle's ghost that haunts the house to this day. In at number 2, we have Clayton House. The Clayton House is a historical treasure, but it's also one of the most haunted places in Arkansas. The home was originally built in 1852 by a man known as Mr. Sutton, and several years later, William Henry Harrison Clayton purchased the house and renovated it, doubling it in size, transforming the style into Victorian Gothic Italianate. Mr. Clayton lived here from 1882 to 1897 with his wife along with their 7 children. The home still has old portraits of William and his wife Florence hanging on the wall, and still had numerous priceless family belongings in the home. William had a twin brother, John K. Clayton, who was a US senator who had been mysteriously assassinated in 1873, and many believe his ghost is one that haunts the Clayton house. The second floor bedroom seems to have the most activity, and staff and visitors visitors have reported hearing footsteps, boots stomping, and doors slamming, along with seeing apparitions. Music and singing have also been heard throughout the house. People who have visited this home have described seeing one ghostly apparition known as the Tall Man, who is dressed in all black, wears a hat, and walks angrily around. Another spirit often seen around the Clayton property is described as the woman in the brown dress. The woman is said to be peaceful and often just stands in one spot quite still. She is believed to be either Mrs. Clayton or possibly a nurse from the time the property was a hospital. The home became abandoned during the Civil War before it transformed into a Union Army hospital. There was a carpenter in 2007 who was doing some repairs on the home and took pictures before it started working, and when the pictures were developed, there was what appeared to be a woman in one of them. The home is now listed on the National Registry of Historic Places and holds tours of the home explaining the history and ghost stories. And finally, in at number 1 we have Cresent Hotel. The Crescent Hotel was built in 1886 and can be found in Eureka Springs. Due to the rich history, it has hundreds of tales of paranormal experiences and ghost sightings. The hotel has previously served as both a private girls' college and a cancer hospital, where Dr. Norman Baker claimed to have the cure for cancer. There are so many stories of ghost sightings, starting in room 218 where Michael, an Irish stonemason, who fell to his death when building the hotel. He's known to hang out in this room and is often seen. Theodora, a cancer patient who is known to be seen fumbling for her keys outside room 419, as well as tidying up for guests when they leave the room. Brecky, who passed away in the hotel, has been seen throughout the hotel, often bouncing a ball. Dr. John Fremont Ellis, the hotel's former in-house doctor in the 19th century, is often seen, or his cherry pipe tobacco is smelled near his former office, which is now room 212. Even the famed hotel cat Morris, who had been buried on the hotel property, is regularly seen and heard. A recurring phenomenon happens at a specific spot on the 3rd floor, where the hotel connects to an annex built onto the hotel when it was a hospital. The area has been said to be a portal to the other side. There have been multiple guests who have grown faint, with a few passing out frequently. Guests turning pale and falling against the wall and then sliding down. Many paranormal investigators believe that limestone has a special ability to absorb and release electromagnetic and psychic energies. Crescent Mounds, in the hilltop the hotel sits on, is predominantly limestone. The massive thick stones used for the body of the hotel were also made of limestone, and these factors may contribute to the amount of paranormal activity the hotel guests experience. The Crescent Hotel is dubbed America's Most Haunted Hotel and has been on many TV shows like Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and Paranormal Witness. There have been an abundance of extraordinary experiences and have attracted the attention of paranormal investigators to study and research the hotel's supernatural activity. The hotel offers daily ghost tours to learn more about the ghost stories, sightings, and the history of the hotel. In at number 5 we have Whispers Estate. The Whispers Estate was built around 1894, and between 1899 and 1901 is when Dr. George and Sarah White moved in. George was a successful physician and ran his practice from their home. The two adopted many orphan children, and unfortunately several passed away in the house over the years. Some of the children they took in were troubled. Many of them passed away in the bedrooms and other areas of the home, and even some of Dr. White's patients have been said to have also passed while in the home. Dr. White practiced in the home for over 25 years, so it's probable but unknown how many over the years had passed in the home. In the early 2000s, the home underwent renovations and a lot of bizarre activity began. Many claim that lights would flicker on and off, footsteps would be heard stomping around on the 2nd floor, and as time went on, the activity escalated. To this day, people reserve time to come and experience all this paranormal activity, and are encouraged to write down any experiences they had while in the home, and these accounts are posted to the Whispers Estate's official Facebook page. You can go through the page and find creepy photos people have taken that show demonic figures, ghost-like creatures, and even orbs. It's also pretty common for the guests to be scratched up by unseen fingernails or touched by an unseen hand. The estate earned the Whispers moniker after the numerous guests that experienced somebody whispering in their ear, somebody they couldn't see. Due to the amount of people who have passed at the home in its early days, it's like there are a number of different spirits that haunt the estate to this day. The Whispers Estate is known as the 4th most haunted house in the United States, but many who have visited believe it to be the most haunted house in the entire country. In at number 4 we have Rhodes Hotel. The Rhodes Hotel was established in 1893 and was named after the first owners, Clara and Newton Rhodes. The youngest child in the Rhodes family, Everett, passed in one of the 2nd-story bedrooms after contracting tuberculosis at 18 years old. Soon after their daughter's death, Newton unfortunately died, and it's believed he had died inside of the house. After Newton's passing, Clara turned the house into a dual brothel and speakeasy. It's said that one of the ladies of the night, Sarah, still haunts her bedroom bedroom tucked behind the stairs on the second floor. After Clara's death, the family home was opened as a hotel in the late 1800s and was meant to house those flocking to east central Indiana during the natural gas boom. It's even believed that John Dillinger and Al Capone stopped at the hotel for a stay after hitching a ride on a train to Indiana. Not only did the family pass in their home, but a preacher by the name of Lester Poor supposedly hanged himself in the attic during the time when the home was converted to a hotel. But many believe his death could have been a murder. Due to the hotel's rich history, many locals and visitors have experienced paranormal activity, and everyone in the town knew that many spirits that passed in the building still haunt it to this day. The hotel closed its doors in 1937 and the property remained in the Rhodes family hands but sat empty for more than 30 years. The hotel and its contents were eventually auctioned off and it landed on the National Register of Historic Places, and the hotel saw 3 owners before the Haleys took it over for restoration. The Rhodes Hotel was purchased by Clint and Linda Haley in 1995 and they heard rumors about the haunting of the hotel, but this didn't faze them. They were more worried about the work they'd have to do to restore the home. The Haleys claim that they didn't encounter any paranormal activity, but many find that hard to believe. The hotel was up for sale again in 2017 when a man by the name of Couch took it over for his charity. Couch had launched the Lost Limbs Foundation 4 years earlier, which raised funds for prosthetic limbs for children. To this day, Couch's charity has owned and run the hotel. Not only had it been named among Indiana's most haunted places, but the hotel is consistently booked for private and paranormal investigations. The overnight investigation tickets can get up to $200 and this hotel attracts people from across the country. There have been many investigators that believe there is extensive activity in this old hotel and people have captured a figure-like shadow moving across the living room curtains with the use of night vision cameras. Most commonly, people hear whispers and the second floor creaking when no one is inside. Unlike the Haleys, Couch said he's seen and heard supernatural happenings in the hotel since moving onto the property in 2017. He's heard footsteps on the staircase, the property camera has turned off randomly, and picked up voices before the footage flickers back on. Once, while hosting an investigation, Couch said he witnessed one of many Victorian dolls left behind from a previous owner jump off of its chair. In at number 3 we have Avon Bridge. The Avon Bridge is known to be haunted by almost every local living in the area. It is a massive trip-arch railroad trestle spinning a rural road over White Lick Creek. The bridge is a fascinating landmark in Hendricks County with lots of legends and history surrounding it, some more sinister than others. There are a few historical facts about the bridge that we do know. It was built in 1906 off County Road 625, was designed by W.M. Dunn, and is still used today. Many haunted stories surround this bridge and the area surrounding it. One story claims that a mother had been walking on the tracks and fell to her death. The mother's wailing could be heard when you drive under the bridge. It's common for many locals to honk when driving under the bridge in an effort to muffle her screams. Another story is that a drunk rail worker slipped during construction and was buried alive in the wet cement. The tale is that when a train goes over the bridge, people claim to still hear his moaning. Many locals say that if you go near the bridge at night, you will hear moaning and can see a ghostly figure of a ghost or even 2 or 3 at a time. If you're traveling near the bridge on a hot summer day, you may be witness to the ghost tears streaming down the concrete. Many people don't even refer to it as the Avon Bridge. It's often called the Haunted Avon Bridge because of the number of accounts of ghost sightings and constant sounds of the moans and screams heard from the ghosts that haunt the bridge. In at number 2 we have James Allison Mansion. The James Allison Mansion was built for James Allison and it was a dream home, done in a grand design and style that exhibited James's wealth and importance. James was an important figure in the auto and plane industry, greatly helping in the development of cars and airplanes. He founded the Presto Light Company, which produced the first efficient headlight for early automobiles and was a founding partner in Carl Fisher's Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He also started Allison Engineering Company, which evolved and transformed into an aircraft engine make known today as the Allison division of Rolls-Royce. James purchased the 65-acre estate and he and his wife Sarah built this glorious mansion, starting construction in 1911 and finishing in 1913. The massive home had an elevator, a billiard room, an indoor pool in the basement, a breakfast room, a library, a grand kitchen, and even pumped-in ice water. 15 years after the Allisons built their forever home, James then fell in love with his secretary, and he divorced his wife Sarah in 1928. Only a month later, James married this former employee, Lucille Musset. However, James contracted a fatal case of pneumonia and died shortly after marrying his second wife at the age of 56. In 1936, the estate went up for sale, and that same year it was bought by Sisters of St. Francis of Oldenburg. The former Allison home became a home for the college's library, administrative offices, classrooms, and sleeping quarters for the sisters. There have been many things seen and heard throughout the years since it became a college. There was a girl who had drowned in the pool in the basement, and James's untimely death in the home. Both people could be haunting this mansion to this day. It's said that people who pass through a sudden accident or a bout of illness, sometimes their spirits hang around, perhaps unaware that they have died or not wanting to accept their deaths, and this is the case for both the little girl and James. The entity of a little girl is often seen throughout the mansion. There are strange cries that are heard from the basement, in the attic, and objects seem to move by themselves and can completely disappear. There is another entity seen and could possibly be more than one, and they like to take keys and objects and move them to odd places. The library in particular is often completely rearranged, like the books and furniture. And finally, in at number 1 we have French Lick Springs Hotel. Nestled in the small resort town of French Lick sits the massive French Lick Springs Hotel. This legendary hotel was constructed in 1845 and is a crown jewel of the southern Indiana town, but there's more to this resort than meets the eye. This Indiana hotel is known to be one of the most haunted places in the state. Thomas Taggart was a mayor at the time and purchased the hotel in 1888. After purchasing the hotel, he added luxurious furnishings, marble floors, and built 2 championship golf courses. During this time, Taggart became the Democratic National Chairman, and the hotel became the unofficial headquarters of the Democratic National Party. In 1931, Franklin Roosevelt visited the hotel because of its Democratic standing and won the presidency a mere year later. Over the years, the hotel and the work Taggart put into it made it one of the most prominent hotels in the area, and even ran the West Baden Springs Hotel out of the business. Unfortunately, in 1916, Taggart passed away, but according to local legend, his spirit has never left the building. Taggart died in 1916, but that hasn't stopped rumors of sightings of this famous hotel owner. Guests and employees frequently encounter strange and paranormal activity throughout the hotel, and they believe it is caused by Taggart himself. Many spot his ghostly figure near the service elevator and can pick up a strong scent of pipe tobacco. Others claim they witnessed his spirit riding down the hallway on a horse and making noise inside the ballroom. Some hear noises and others encounter his ghost, though usually both don't occur at the same time. Not only is Taggart's ghost living in the hotel, but there are also rumors of a former bellhop that lingers around the hotel. Many believe that he was a current employee until they saw old photos of him hanging on the wall or were told no bellhops were on duty when people had encountered him. Employees and guests say that it's pretty hard not to encounter some sort of activity when you're in the hotel, and due to the vast amount of paranormal sightings are why it's considered by many to be the most haunted place in Indiana and one of the most haunted places in all of the United States. Coming in at number 5 we have the Driscoll Hotel in Austin. The Driscoll Hotel in Austin is rumored to be alive with the ghosts of the past who reveal themselves to guests of the present. Colonel Jesse Driscoll opened the luxurious hotel in 1886. The wealthy cattle baron bought the corner lot of Brazos and 6th Street for $7,500. The Driscoll has welcomed high society events and historic political events over the years. In 1934, Lyndon Baines Johnson met his future wife, Lady Bird, at the Driscoll. He later used the hotel as his headquarters for the White House Press Corps. Today, guests say the hotel is haunted by Colonel Driscoll's spirit. He was known as an avid cigar smoker, and at times guests report the smell of cigar smoke despite the fact the hotel has been smoke-free for several years. They also say Colonel Driscoll has a fascination with lights. It could happen by his portrait or anywhere in the hotel. It's very likely Colonel Driscoll is checking in on his property. Among the stories of the Driscoll is the legend of Peter Lawless. He was a railroad man who lived at the Driscoll for 31 years until his death in 1917. Some say his spirit still haunts the hotel today. Guests and employees have reported seeing Lawless in hotel lobby elevators. He can often be seen walking out of the elevator, checking his railroad watch, nodding to the staff, and then disappearing. The spirit of a little girl is also said to haunt the Driscoll Hotel. In 1887, 4-year-old Samantha Houston was chasing a bull when she fell to her death on the grand staircase. She was the daughter of a Texas senator. Guests have heard the unexplained laughter of a little girl and the sound of a bouncing ball in different areas of the hotel. Samantha's father paid for someone to paint her portrait shortly after her death. It now hangs on the 5th floor of the Driscoll. Some say she tries to communicate through it. People say once in a while you can catch her giving a smile and her expression will change in the painting. These mysterious happenings are why the Driscoll is known as the most haunted hotel in Texas. It attracts guests looking to encounter visitors from the other side. They are playful, mischievous, very quirky sense of humor when it comes to playing little tricks on people. people. Coming in at number 5, we have La Fonda on the Plaza in Santa Fe, New Mexico. In the historic district of Santa Fe, New Mexico sits the historic La Fonda Hotel. This old hotel has been providing a pillow for weary travelers since 1922. The location itself has been called home to some kind of inn or fonda since Santa Fe's earliest days. When Santa Fe was founded in 1607, records show that an inn on this location was one of the first businesses established in the new settlement. According to local law, court was held in the original Adobe Hotel, as well as executions, when guilty offenders were hanged in the lobby. Over the years, the hotel was destroyed and rebuilt several times over. As more and more pioneers traveled the Santa Fe Trail, the La Fonda became a popular destination for trappers, traders, mountain men, soldiers, politicians, and the like. The gambling hall continued to be a major feature, however, providing entertainment for military officers and the occasional professional gambler. Fortunes were made and lost here, and one unfortunate person lost his life in 1857 at the end of a rope strung up in the hotel's backyard by a lynch mob. 10 years later, in 1867, the John P. Slough, Chief Justice of the Territorial Supreme Court, was fatally shot in the hotel lobby. Slough was in a dispute with Captain Ryneson, a member of the territorial legislature, when he called Ryneson a liar and a thief. More than a century ago, a distraught salesman who lost his company's money in a card game leaped down a deep well that was located just outside the gambling hall of the Exchange Hotel. Most of the history of the hotel is strung together by a string of tragedies. The hotel has seen more than its fair share of violence and anger. Today, the La Fonda Hotel is said to host not only travelers visiting Santa Fe, but also several ghosts. Some people believe that Judge Slough continues to walk its hallways. However, more often reported is the ghost of the distraught salesman who jumped into the well after losing all of his company's money. The hotel's dining room, called the La Plazuela, is situated directly over the old well, and both guests and staff alike have reported the sight of a ghostly figure that walks to the center of the room, then seemingly jumps into the floor and disappears. In the 1970s, a guest reportedly called the front desk to complain that someone was walking up and down the hallway in front of his room. When an employee was sent to investigate, he saw a tall man in a long black coat disappear into a stairwell. However, when he followed him to the stairs, there was no sign of the mysterious visitor. Today, the La Fonda Hotel is a vibrant historic landmark on Santa Fe's downtown plaza, known for its award-winning architecture and decor unique artwork. Guests don't appear to be put off by the spirits that still live there, with some staying there in hopes of encountering a lost spirit. In at number 3, we have Hotel Chelsea in New York City. The Hotel Chelsea has been a formidable presence on the West 23rd Street since the 1880s, taking up a large section of the block between 7th and 8th Avenues. Over the past decades, the hotel has become a shell of its former self, as ownership has changed hands. We've seen its legendary walls enshrouded in scaffolding, and long-time residents leave as the building is transformed into luxury hotels. A list of notable building residents have called the Hotel Chelsea home, from authors like Mark Twain, Dylan Thomas, as well as Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey there. There is no other building in NYC that has been the home, the muse, and the inspiration for multiple generations of artists. Opened in 1884 as an experiment by architect Philip Hubert, Hotel Chelsea was Manhattan's first cooperative building that catered to the personal and professional needs of inhabitants. It was a social experiment of sorts for a mix of the carpenters, electricians, and interior designers who created the place, in addition to a handful of artists, writers, and singers. From its inception, the 12-story building was a haven for creative types, and it didn't take long for the walls of the common spaces, which at time included dining halls, to become decorated with canvases and murals, some of which were created by the esteemed students of the Hudson River School. But Hubert's social experiment quickly went bankrupt and belly up. In 1905, Hotel Chelsea opened its doors to the world, offering luxury accommodations on Manhattan's West 23rd Street. A few decades later, after plenty of wear and tear, management was forced to lower room prices to mirror the condition of the rooms. During its glittering peak, day-to-day life at Hotel Chelsea was far from glamorous. Tenants would gather to smoke and drink in the hallways of the Victorian Gothic building. Drug use was rampant, and someone was always accidentally setting something on fire. The hotel shuttered to visitors in 2011, and after a series of unsuccessful acquisitions, was ultimately purchased 5 years later by a trio of hoteliers: Richard Bourne and Ira Druckia of BD Hotels, and Sean McPherson of Bowery Hotel and Jane Hotel. The new owners are in the midst of doing a thorough renovation of the ailing space, planned to reopen it in 2019 as a glittering luxury destination. With the hotel's long and complicated history full of every type of person, there have been spirits that have been trapped within the walls. Nancy Spungen, girlfriend of Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, was found stabbed on October 12, 1978. She was found on the hotel bathroom floor by the staff. She did not survive her attack. Sid was charged with her murder but died before he could be convicted. The next tragedy that is considered to be quite popular when it comes to the Hotel Chelsea is that a poet and writer named Dylan Marlays Thomas. This occurred many years earlier than Nancy's on the 9th day of November in the year 1953. In October of 1953, Mr. Thomas arrived in the state of New York, and according to those around him, he had wealth and medical problems. Many claim that he had suffered from regular blackouts and even suffered from medical conditions associated with his heart. In addition to these issues, he also had to carry an inhaler because of the fact that he suffered from a respiratory condition. He became ill during his stay at the hotel. He passed away 3 days later from pneumonia. However, some people believe he was poisoned. Both Nancy and Dylan, along with other lesser-known ghosts, are known to plague their own rooms within the hotel. Some guests have heard screaming from Nancy's bathroom when staying in the neighboring rooms, or waking up suddenly in the night. Others have heard footsteps from outside the rooms, along with running up and down the halls. Currently, renovations continue as of April 2021, with a plan to reopen by the end of the year. Will you visit once the hotel is reopened? Will the renovations make a difference to the hauntings? Probably not. In at number 2, we have Hawthorne Hotel in Salem, Massachusetts. The Hotel Hawthorne has been one of the most cherished landmarks in Salem for a century. The hotel was a joint venture for the town, looking to build their first hotel to service visitors. They decided to name the hotel after author Nathaniel Hawthorne, who grew up in the town. Opening in July of 1925, the new magnificent destination offered 150 outstanding guest rooms, as well as a 2-story lobby complete with a mezzanine and balcony. It even attracted series of illustrious guests, including the likes of Betty Davis and Johnny Cash, but it was the television sitcom Bewitched that brought the Hawthorne Hotel its greatest fame. In 1970, Elizabeth Montgomery, her real-life husband Bill Asher, and the rest of the cast and crew stayed at the Hawthorne Hotel while filming episodes for the show. The hotel was flooded with calls asking if it was the Bewitched Hotel for years after the Salem saga first aired. Bridget Bishop was one of the poor women accused and convicted of witchcraft, was said to have owned an apple orchard upon which the hotel was later built. Many guests maintain that they have encountered her very spirit within the hotel. In front of the 6th floor's room 612, the apparition of a woman is often seen standing still. From time to time, she will wander up and down the hallway where room 612 is located. Within the room, guests have complained of the sensation that they are not alone, as if someone else is sharing the room with them. And inside room 325 of the 3rd floor, there have been several reports of hearing an unseen baby crying, lights turning off and on, and even the water faucets turning on and off. Others have reported numerous unidentifiable sounds. One particular employee refuses to work nights ever again. During his evening shift, after cleaning a room, he went to get supplies and returned to find the room's entire configuration changed around. With the hotel being built in Salem, there is no telling just how many tortured women still roam on the land, all dying in horrific ways their spirits have struggled to pass on and accept their fate. And lastly, in at number 1, we have the Stanley Hotel in Colorado. The Rocky Mountains are home to a hotel that's widely considered one of the most haunted places in America, and it has ties to a renowned horror film. The Stanley Hotel in Colorado is said to be haunted by several different ghosts, from past owners to children and even a couple pets. Along with its haunted reputation, the colonial revival style hotel also inspired author Stephen King to write The Shining, one of his most popular novels that was adapted into a 1980 film starring Jack Nicholson. The Stanley Hotel was built by inventor Freeland Stanley, who moved out to Colorado hoping that the fresh air and plentiful sunlight would relieve his tuberculosis. When he arrived in 1903, he was weak and underweight, but after just one season, hotel staff says his health was restored. The hotel says Stanley was so overjoyed that he vowed to return each summer and ended up building the hotel to bring a level of sophistication to the region. The Stanley Hotel opened in 1909. Stanley died in 1940 at the age of 91, but his spirit is still said to roam the hotel. Specifically, staff says he's been spotted in the hotel's billiard room and bar. Stanley's wife Flora has also reportedly been spotted in the hotel and is known to tickle the keys of a piano. Another ghost that's been said to show up is a former housekeeper of the hotel, Elizabeth Wilson, or Mrs. Wilson. Tour guides say Wilson was lighting lanterns in room 217 when she was seriously injured in an explosion. She survived the blast but passed away years later. Now it seems Wilson is a regular in room 217. Guests report items being moved, luggage being packed up, and lights going off and on. It also seems Wilson is rather conservative. Guides say she's not a fan of unmarried couples. People who aren't married have reported feeling cold presence between them while in bed. On the 4th floor, guests have also reported hearing children running around, laughing and playing. Guides say that's where nannies and kids they watched would spend much of their time back in the day. Not all of the hotel's purported ghosts stand on 2 legs. There's a pet cemetery on the grounds that guides say is the final resting place of some of the owner's animals. Staff says the ghosts of a cat and a dog have been roaming around. Could this cemetery also be the inspiration for King's novel Pet Sematary? It definitely seems possible. Guides end their tour in a cave system below the hotel, where staff says there's a higher than average concentration of limestone and quartz, which is believed by some to draw spirits to the property. Do you dare visit the Shining Hotel? In at number 5, we have Loftus Hall. This place may be the most most haunted house in all of Ireland, and it is said to be haunted by the devil himself. Lotus Hall is a large country house located on the Hook Peninsula in County Wexford. In 1170, Raymond le Gros came to the county and built this massive castle, which was known as the Houseland Castle. The Redmond family replaced the original castle with another in about 1350. This second castle was known as the Hall, or Redmond Hall. Later in 1872, John Henry Wellington Graham Loftus undertook an extensive rebuilding of the entire mansion, adding many of the famous elements like the grand staircase, mosaic tiled floor, elaborate parquet flooring, and technical elements that hadn't been seen in houses in Ireland at the time, such as flushing toilets and blown air heating. Charles Tottenham became the lord of the manor in 1752 by marrying the Honourable Anne Loftus, daughter of the first Viscount Loftus, and they had 6 children. However, his wife became ill and died while the girls were still young. 2 years later, Tottenham married his cousin Jane Cliff, and they lived together, along with one of Charles's daughters in Loftus Hall. One evening, Charles was resting in his home in 1775 with his second wife and daughter from his first marriage, Anne, while the Loftus family were away on business. During a storm, a ship unexpectedly arrived at the Hook Peninsula, where the mansion was located. A young man was welcomed into the mansion. Anne and the young man became very close. One night, the family and the mysterious man were in the games room playing cards, and it was then when Anne noticed the man having a cloven foot. The man went up through the roof, ultimately leading to his demise and leaving behind a large hole in the ceiling which remains today. Soon Anne became mentally ill. It's believed that the family were ashamed of Anne and locked her away in her favourite room, which was known as the tapestry room. She refused food and drink and sat with her knees under her chin looking out the tapestry room window, waiting for her mysterious stranger to return until she passed away in the tapestry room in 1775. It is said that when she died, they could not straighten her body as her muscles had seized, and she was buried in the same sitting position in which she had died. After her death, everyone who had lived there says she still haunts the hall to this day. After being purchased by Aidan Quigley in 2011, this building was marketed as a haunted house that hosted guided tours of the house until 2020, when it was put on the market for sale. In at number 4, we have the Abbey of the Black Hag. The old abbey lies on a small valley about 2 miles east of the village of Shannon Golden in the townland of the Old Abbey. One of the earliest nunneries in Ireland, it is first mentioned in 1298 and was founded on land donated by John Fitz-Thomas of Conello, who had died in 1261. Remains include the abbey church with 2 small spaces adjacent, and one appears to have been a sacristy and a vaulted building to the west. There are also walls and a gate and traces of an orchard, a fish pond, and a pigeon house. Modifications to the church in the 15th century saw the inclusion of an east window in the church as well as a doorway in the north. Traces of window decoration, columns, and carved tombstones remain. Barrels were also located and the church plate was reportedly found in the late 18th century. It is said that the last abbess terrified the local population with her use of the black arts and sexual practices in a room to the south of the church, and is now called the Black Hag cell. After the closure of the abbey, the hag remained there and continued to perform her unholy acts, and it's believed she lived unusually long, which caused her ancient skin to become darker and darker over time. Another legend is regarding the Earl of Desmond, and that during his escape from one of the many battles between the Geraldines and the Butlers, the Countess was wounded by an arrow. The wound was so serious that the Earl believed the Countess had died and buried her beneath the altar in the main chapel. The Countess awoke to find herself buried alive, and when people would see a ghostly figure, they went to her gravesite and they had found her finger bones had been worn out from clawing at the coffin, and it's believed her screams can still be heard to this day. In at number 3, we have Cork District Lunatic Asylum. The Cork District Lunatic Asylum opened in 1789, and by 1845 the Irish Lunatics Asylum Act allowed for appropriating the lunatic asylum in the city of Cork to the purposes of a district lunatic asylum. The legislation provided for 2 new asylums, a criminal one in Dundrum, Dublin, and then a 500-bed asylum in Cork. This building was originally in 3 separate blocks, later be joined together in the interest of providing more accommodation. To become the longest facade of any building in the country, it opened in 1852. William Saunders Halloran was an Irish psychiatrist who worked at this asylum from the time it opened until his death, and was the author of practical observations on the causes and cure of insanity. This doctor's methods were extreme and torturous. He created something called the Halloran's chair, which rotated hysterical patients up to 100 revolutions per minute. It rarely had the desired effect. Inmates lived out their days in a state of paranoia and despair while admitted at the asylum. The horrors of this place finally ended when the asylum was closed in 1992. It stayed abandoned for many years, and locals and tourists went to visit this scary place. They claim the tortured souls still remain here, and paranormal investigators even visited and claimed to have seen both and heard heard voices of these tormented souls. Today the building is being converted and renovated into apartments called Atkins Hall. In at number 2 we have the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club is located on Mount Pellier Hill in Dublin. The building gets its name because it's believed to be one of the first Freemason lodges in Ireland. Around 1725, William Connolly, who was one of the wealthiest men in Ireland at the time, built this building to be a hunting lodge. Years after the build, the roof was blown off during a storm and locals believed it was the work of an aggressive spirit seeking vengeance on Connolly for building on their land, and that's when the story started swirling. After Connolly's death, the building was quickly sold and is said to have become a meeting place for the Irish Hellfire Club. The club was founded in 1735 by Richard Parsons, a known dabbler in black magic. The members met at locations across Dublin and were known for their immoral behaviour and debauchery involving alcohol and sex. The secrecy surrounding the club members led to speculation that they were Satanists and devil worshippers. The president of the club was named the King of Hell and dressed like Satan with horns, wings and hooves. The members were said to set a place at each meeting for the devil in the hopes that he would attend. They were also said to hold black masses in the lodge, during which cats and even servants were sacrificed. Some say the building was deliberately set on fire in order to enhance its hellish atmosphere. The best known Hellfire Club story is the one in which the devil himself appears. A stranger had joined the members at a game of cards. At some point, one of the card players dropped a card on the floor. As he bent down to retrieve it, he noticed that the stranger had cloven hooves instead of feet. Another tale concerns a young farmer, curious to find out what went on in the meetings. Climbing up Mount Pellier Hill one night, he was invited by members of the club and allowed to witness the night's activities. He was found the next morning trembling and terrified. Tradition says he spent the rest of his life unable to speak, unable even to remember his name. The Hellfire Club remains burnt out and abandoned on Montpellier Hill looking over Dublin. It is a beautiful sight on a sunny day, but make sure you leave before night. It's a beautiful sight on a sunny day, but make sure you leave before night comes, because you may come into contact with the unusual smells, ghostly apparitions or paranormal sightings. And it's said that satanic rituals are known to be done here. And finally, in at number 1 we have Leap Castle. Of the many haunted places in Ireland, Leap Castle is possibly the most notorious of all, and is one of the most well-known symbols of haunted Ireland. This place is located in Kildare in County Offaly. There are many accounts of when the main tower was constructed, but could go back as far as 1250 CE and was built by the O'Bannon clan. The O'Bannons were the secondary chieftains of the territory and were subject to the ruling O'Carroll's clan. There are many stories of who or what haunts this place. A red lady ghost is reported to walk the halls holding a dagger, and also 2 little girls named Charlotte and Emily are reported to run up and down the spiral staircase in the mansion. A red lady ghost is reported to walk the halls holding a dagger, and also 2 girls named Charlotte and Emily are reported to run up and down the spiral staircase in the mansion. Emily passed away after she fell from the top of the castle's tower, and Charlotte can still be seen running around after her sister and calling her name. The castle was visited by paranormal investigators from shows like Most Haunted and Scariest Places on Earth. These investigators believe the castle is haunted by a sinister elemental spirit. The creature is described as being about the size of a sheep with a human face, black holes for eyes and nose, and giving off the smell of a rotting corpse. During renovation of the castle in the 1900s, workers found an oubliette behind a wall in the chapel. At the bottom of the shaft were many human skeletons on wooden spikes. When cleaned out, it took 3 cartloads to remove the bones. Today, the dungeon is now covered over in order to keep people away from it. It's believed that the O'Carrolls would drop guests through the trapdoor to be impaled on the spikes 8 feet below and could be haunted by the people killed by the O'Carrolls. The castle describes itself as the world's most haunted house, due to the numerous amounts of spirits located here.
Number 5 on this list is the House of Wills, a historic mansion with a deep history and an even deeper haunting. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution says it was built in 1898 by the Germania Tavernian Social Club, according to the website of the current owner, Cleveland artist Eric Freeman. By 1912, it was turned into the hospital for immigrants, and by 1920, it housed the Cleveland Hebrew Institute until 1938. Prominent African-American entrepreneur and businessman John Walker Wills bought the property in 1942 to use as the location for his second funeral parlor. Wills died in the home in 1971, and his family sold it in 2005. The home fell into disrepair until Freeman bought it in 2010 and started the challenging work of restoring and renovating the property. Freeman said on his website that Wills is believed to be one of the many ghosts that haunt the house, and on his Facebook page he posted a scary electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, recording from the house of what sounds like dozens of spirits from beyond trying to be heard by the living. There have actually been some famous paranormal investigators that have looked into this mansion before, and they all came to the same conclusion. It's haunted. A swirling mist will occasionally appear in the mansion, followed by stark temperature changes and a horribly foreboding sensation. Visitors who've stayed at this mansion for extended periods of time say that the visit changed them. That they're sort of constantly on alert after that stay, as if they're hyper aware all of the time. Unless you're trying to feel anxious literally all of the time, I'd book another place to stay if I was you. Number 4 on this list is the Cely Rose House. This house is located in the Malabar Farm State Park, which is in Richland County. To this day, it's still a working farm, which is kind of shocking considering the horrible tragedy that occurred here many years ago. Cely Rose is actually the name of a person, a young girl who lived in the late 1800s. This girl wasn't innocent and sweet as the stereotypical farm gal is. She was evil. There used to be a neighbor house right nearby the Cely Rose house, and in that home lived a young boy around the same age as Cely. Cely developed quite the crush on him and wanted to marry him. It seemed that he liked her as well, and he wanted to do the same. This was all fine and good, except her family wouldn't allow it. Cely's family forbid her from marrying this boy, and this was what caused her to do what she did next. Cely wouldn't accept this answer and took it on herself to get rid of the problem, her family. She poisoned them, every single one of them. She did it by soaking flypaper in water and then secretly pouring the arsenic-laced water over the cottage cheese she served them, according to Ohio State Park News. They all died soon afterwards, except for her. This was soon found out by the authorities, and Cely, being as young as she was, wasn't sent to jail, but she was put into a mental institute. She was there until she died many, many years later. This home is supposedly still haunted by her and the ghost of her dead family, though. Scratches and eerie cracks are heard throughout all the time. Many people have reported being attacked while they're here as well. Avoid this home at all costs if you find yourself in Ohio. Number 3 on this list is the Franklin Castle. This house is actually called the Tiedemann House, but over the years and from the history it has, it's been nicknamed the Franklin Castle. News 5 Cleveland says, known as the Franklin Castle, this Victorian-style stone house has been a witness to history and withstood the development of the West Side. The stone castle carries an American Horror Story type history along with it. The house was built between 1881 and 1883 by a German immigrant, Hans Tiedemann. At the turn of the 19th century, Franklin Boulevard was one of the most upscale residential avenues in Cleveland. Franklin Castle was sold in 1896, just 1 year after his wife Louise died. In the century that followed, the house saw many new owners and new uses. Rumors began to circulate around 1986 that the house was haunted by the ghosts of Mrs. Tiedemann and her daughter Emma, who died before the house was even built. So this one is kind of strange because it doesn't seem like anything terrible happened to these two ladies in their death, or at least nothing that I could find. Most times when a spirit haunts a place, it's because they died in a fashion that was very unnatural. That wasn't the case here, and yet they still haunt the castle. It's a nice home to look at from the outside, but definitely not a place that you should be going into. Avoid it altogether. Number 2 on this list is the Gore Orphanage. Anything that is named the Gore Orphanage is bound to be haunted, and this is no exception. News 5 Cleveland says it's claimed to be one of the most haunted places in Ohio. Located in the countryside of Vermilion, a fire engulfed an old orphanage, burning dozens of people alive, according to long-told tales. For over a century, visitors to the Gore Orphanage have reported strange experiences of glowing lights, chilling cries, and apparitions. Light of Hope was the actual name of the orphanage and was established by Johann Sprunger and his wife Katrina. They moved to the Vermilion area after their 2 former businesses in Indiana also caught fire. Throughout the years, children told stories of abuse, neglect, and slave labor conditions. In 1909, an investigation was conducted, but because the state had no laws or regulations pertaining to orphanages, nothing could formally be done to prosecute the couple. While there's no proof that any deaths actually did occur, there's still little doubt about its reputation for being one of the most haunted areas in Ohio. So not only did this place suffer a horrible tragedy where several people passed away during a massive blaze, but prior to that even happening, there seemed to be so many huge human rights violations going on. I have no idea how back in the day the state wouldn't have had any laws pertaining to orphanages, but it just shows how back then these operations and children were so neglected. Because of all this tragedy and just general sadness, we have what stands today, a horribly haunted, abandoned old orphanage. Now this is on the list of places not to go, and that's because it is actually very dangerous to do so. The ghosts here are upset, and interacting with them will be a huge strain on your mind. However, if you are feeling strong enough, then I actually do encourage you to go. The only way these spirits will finally find peace is if they finally get the attention from the public that they deserve, something that clearly this place didn't get while it was in operation. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Ohio State Reformatory. This is one of the most famous spots in all of Ohio. It got the public's attention when it was used as the filming location for the famous movie Shawshank Redemption. It also got the public's attention though when it was claimed to be one of the most haunted spots in the entire state. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution says workers laid the cornerstone on what was known as the intermediate prison between the Boys Industrial School in Lancaster and the Ohio State Penitentiary in Columbus for nonviolent offenders on November 4th, 1886, according to the Mansfield News Journal. The building was used as an operational prison for 94 years until 1981, and during that time there was a good deal of violence, death, and disease. It's not surprising in the least to find out that this place is haunted. Visitors have reported seeing shadows, hearing strange noises and conversations, and experiencing feelings of anger, dread, and sadness. In 1948, the Reformatory's farm boss, his wife, and his daughter were kidnapped and killed by 2 enraged parolees outside the prison's walls. But the building itself is believed to be haunted by the ghost of Arthur Lewis Glattack, the superintendent at the prison from 1935 until 1959, and his wife, Helen. The warden's wife died from an accidental shooting, and several years later, the warden died from a heart attack, according to the Preservation Society. The couple's disembodied voices have been heard in the prison's old superintendent's office. A boy is also believed to haunt the basement, where he was reportedly beaten to death, according to the website Mysterious Heartland. So, yeah, I think it's pretty clear by all of this that this place is not the sort of spot you want to be visiting anytime soon. The amount of violence that this location would have seen is just truly abhorrent, and I'm actually surprised that they were able to get through the entire filming of the Shawshank Redemption without some serious ghostly interventions. Maybe it's because they had Morgan Freeman in the movie, and, well, let's face it, he's kind of an angel. Number 5 on this list is the Devil's Precipice. The Devil's Precipice is located in the village of Cozumel and is definitely one of the cooler entries on this list in my opinion. The Devil's Precipice is basically one big dangerous treasure hunt. The legend says that bandits hid some very valuable treasure here hundreds of years ago after they pulled off a massive heist. They didn't just leave it here though, but they actually cursed the treasure in the area around it so that the only people who could ever get it would be them. This was many years ago, and since then this curse has made it impossible for those who are hunting this treasure to ever actually find it. It's said that this area can be haunted by a bunch of different things, and your experience searching for this treasure differs from person to person. It's not uncommon though for those seeking this treasure to completely lose their minds. Apparently these people won't even be able to fully describe their experience after they finished, but their brains will just have gone to complete mush and they're just a shell of their former selves. Some people are lucky enough to not get this fate, but instead come face to face with some bull-like demons. The body of a human with the head of a bull. These creatures are said to guard the treasure and will stop at nothing to keep you from taking it. The luckiest people don't need to deal with either of these things though, and instead just get wildly confused and lost. When someone is approaching the treasure, it's said that a spell will be cast on them. They'll blink and then they'll find themselves many kilometers away from where they previously were. Their bodies just go into this trance-like state and they completely lose all sense of direction, just walking aimlessly through the woods. Oftentimes when they're found, they're completely covered in scratch marks and have no idea what happened to them. The lure of buried treasure is appealing, but it's clear that this is a treasure that just simply doesn't want to be found, and it's going to do anything to stop you from getting it. Number 4 on this list is the Chaga Monastery. Built in 1780, this monastery is located outside the capital city of Romania. Even though Romanians back in the day spent a long time building this place, it was never really used for anything. It was never properly blessed blessed or consecrated, and because of that, it's been host to a series of unfortunate events. It is now the site of paranormal activity. Only 10 years after it was built, Turkish troops came in and raided it. During their raid, they set a fire in this building and everything burned, but the building still stood. Then, several years later, the building and those who were in it got hit with a massive outbreak of the plague, and if that wasn't bad enough, the building was also hit later with a massive earthquake which caused the bell tower to collapse and the bell was drawn away by a nearby river. The fact that there's any building left standing at all is actually kind of a marvel, but due to its history, locals say it's super haunted. People warn you of going to this place because if you do, it's said that you'll get hit with some horrible luck. There have also been sightings of very sickly individuals, assumingly victims of the plague outbreak that happened many years ago. The most common paranormal experience at this place though is the ringing of the bell. The same bell that fell off so many years ago will ring out when there's a full moon in the sky. Honestly, the ringing of a bell isn't too bad and would actually be pretty cool to experience if it was a full moon, but if you do decide to go, then I recommend keeping your distance. You don't want to get a slew of bad luck following you around just so you could hear this one ghost bell. Number 3 on this list is Gamana. Gamana is currently an abandoned Romanian village that isn't doing too hot right now. Everything about this town was nice and quaint until in 1978 when its world got turned upside down. Communist ruler at the time, Nicolae Ceausescu, decided that he wanted to exploit a massive reserve for copper that was close to the village. This copper mine produced incredible amounts of copper and was extremely profitable, but it was at the expense of these villagers. Mining copper creates a lot of waste that you can't just put anywhere. Well, the dictator decided that the perfect spot was the village of Gamana. All the local villagers were ousted from their homes and sent over 100 kilometers away and given little compensation for their houses and their trouble. Then their homes and their village was swallowed up by a sea of toxic waste that's literally still here to this day. Nowadays, you can only see the top of the church poking its head out of this dangerous lake of poison. Before the villagers left, it said that they put a curse on this land. Those with ill intentions will feel the effects of despair and loneliness forever. They'll feel like an outcast from their homes, from society, and from their family and friends. It said that they wanted to make those who came to this place with ill intentions feel how they felt when they had to leave their homes and go to a completely new place with no warning. Make them feel like they don't belong and they're a burden on those around them. This feeling is echoed by those who visited this place, and locals say that if you do want to see this in person, to make sure that your intentions are nothing but kind and gentle. Factor in a whole other reason why you shouldn't go to this place, but it's literally because it's a giant lake of toxic waste, and I'm just guessing here, but I imagine that that's not ideal to be breathing in. Number 2 on this list is Dracula's Castle. This wouldn't be a complete list if I didn't bring up Romania's most famous fictional character and his residence. The castle, also known as Bran Castle, is located in Transylvania, which is also in Romania. It shares a shocking resemblance to Dracula's castle in Bram Stoker's classic novel. Dracula, being a vampire, would walk around his castle walls by himself, occasionally coming out at nighttime to feast on human victims or turn them into other vampires. The character of Dracula is often associated with Vlad the Impaler, and even though Vlad didn't spend too much of his time at this castle, it's believed that this castle is the inspiration for Dracula's home. Now, I should note that this castle probably isn't actually haunted. Unlike the other entries on this list, this castle isn't known for having horrible atrocities take place inside its walls. The horrible tragedies that occurred all took place within someone's mind, and then that person wrote them on a page for all of us to envision. Therefore, in all honesty, I'm kind of breaking the rules a little bit with this entry because I do think that you should go and visit Dracula's castle. There aren't actual ghosts there, so you're not risking any harm befalling you, and you get to literally walk through the walls imagining Dracula doing the same thing. They have a restaurant by this castle, they have tons of events there, and they even throw the occasional party. On Halloween, you can go there for a special event and celebrate in Dracula's literal castle. I actually don't think I can come up with a cooler place to celebrate Halloween on Earth than in Dracula's castle, but if you guys can, then comment it down below. However, I don't know what it's gonna take to beat out Dracula's literal home. So, number 1 on this list is Corvina Castle. Corvina Castle, even though it wasn't written as Dracula's castle, honestly should have been. This is a castle in Romania that has seen its fair share of horrors and it's deeply haunted because of it. This castle has had tons of horror stories over the years. One of them says that Vlad the Impaler was actually held captive here for 7 years in the dungeons, that he lived off of rats and he impaled them after he'd eaten them, that his deep desire for blood and death rose as he was trapped between these walls. Another legend talks of 3 Turkish prisoners who were promised freedom if they dug a 100 100-foot deep well. The prisoners did this, and it took them over 15 years to accomplish the project, but when they were finished, were mercilessly thrown back into their cells and tortured. This castle even has a bear pit in the dungeons. It's said that those who were sentenced to death would be taken and thrown into this bear pit with a hungry bear inside and mauled to death by the animal. Horrific torture devices have been found in this castle and other dark, sadistic things that have made it one of the most haunted spots in all of Romania. Now, due to all this violence, there are several curses and hauntings that hang over this place. The first one is the well. Locals warn to never drink from that well, and also if you visit this castle, throw a coin down there and say a prayer. The 3 Turkish prisoners who dug it cursed it before they died and made it so that bad things will come to those who drink the water. The second is a monk. There was a monk who was staying at this castle who was caught eavesdropping on a conversation between 2 people. He was taken outside and bricked until he died. His spirit still roams around the halls of this building to this day, with some people reportedly having conversations with him before. Several other people have seen ghostly apparitions of those who look to be dead, and some have even seen full scenes of people being brutally tortured. Dread, despair, depression, these are all commonly reported feelings from visitors of this castle. Certainly not a spot that I recommend going if you do find yourself in Romania.
In at number 5 we have Eldridge Hotel. The Eldridge Hotel is a historic building located in downtown Lawrence, Kansas. The building is named after Shayla Eldridge, who was a prominent anti-slavery individual who lived here in the 1800s. The building became an apartment complex in the 1970s, but there was a strong desire by the city to see it open as a hotel, and a group of investors contributed, as well as the city of Lawrence, into industrial revenue bonds to make this dream a reality. In the later 1980s, it opened as a hotel. A popular story has circulated about the hauntings in this hotel, with the locals, employees, and guests that the ghost is that of Shayla Eldridge, who haunts the halls to this day. Many claim that because the Eldridge house's original cornerstone is located in room 506, and his spirit will manifest in that room and also roam around the building. People who have stayed in this room have claimed to witness breath marks on recently cleaned mirrors, doors opening and shutting on their own, and lights turning on and off by themselves. Others claim that the hotel's elevator is also haunted by a different spirit who is known to open and shut the elevator doors on the 5th floor. The 5th floor is said to contain a portal to the spirit world. A popular photograph was taken during the 1980s that clearly shows a ghost-like figure in the building's elevator. Many other photographers have mentioned having unexplained technical difficulties with their cameras when near the elevator. The story of the hotel and the hauntings of Eldridge was the inspiration for the movie The Demon's Shadow, and the hotel was featured in the series My Ghost Story and has been depicted in many writings. Many believe the rich history has resulted in the amount of paranormal activity. In at number 4, Midland Railroad Hotel. The Midland Railroad Hotel is known for serving the largest steak around, and if you can finish all of it, you get it for free. But it has a sinister, haunting history. It was first a popular train stop in the 1890s, then known for being the location for the movie Paper Moon, where many scenes were filmed at this hotel in 1973. Since then, it's gone through fires, the Great Depression, and plenty of renovations. It is now owned by the Wilson Foundation, has been back in business since 2003, and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Not only is this hotel known for these interesting things, it's most known now for the paranormal activity that lurks around the hotel. The most famous ghost is that of an orphan girl that haunts the 3rd floor, who knocks on doors, runs through the hallways, and even jumps on your bed, leaving little footprints. A ghost hunting team has experienced this spirit and have recorded sounds of the little girl. Another 3rd floor room is where a sheriff was said to have been lynched, and sometimes the door is unable to be unlocked even by the master key. Ghostly figures have been seen at the top of the stairs, and things in the kitchen have flown distances suddenly without being touched by anyone. There are also many ghostly figures that are seen on the staircases, and have left many to believe that the fire that took many lives back in 1902 are the results of some of these paranormal presences. The owner of the Midland Railroad Hotel, Melinda Merrill, says that there's not one employee who hasn't seen or felt something, and you can definitely feel a presence when you enter the hotel. In at number 3 we have Hotel Josephine. The Hotel Josephine is considered by many to be the most haunted hotel in Kansas. It was built in 1890, located in the city of Holton, and is the oldest consecutive operating hotel west of the Mississippi River. The history of the hotel is rich but also very haunted. The hotel was built by A.D. Walker and was named after his daughter Josephine. When it was built, she was only 4 months old, and she attended the local elementary school and graduated Kansas University. Her graduation graduation photo is hung in the front parlor, above the antique piano, and according to the current hotel manager, Tracer Fox, her spirit is just one that is wandering the hotel. Tracer Fox has expressed his belief in the spirits when he first stayed at the hotel. He was woken up suddenly at 3:30 AM and his bed was moving. He figured there was an earthquake, but when nothing in the news confirmed it, he knew it was a spirit. His mother came and stayed in a room across from him and experienced the exact same thing he did with no explanation for it. They had been skeptics before these happenings, but they are both now firm believers. Other guests staying at the hotel have similar stories, as well as experiencing hearing strange sounds, laughter, footsteps, and seeing shadows. It has been expressed that spirits can be found on each floor. One of the most haunted rooms in the hotel is the Buffalo Room, where shadows are often seen and photographed in the mirrors around the room, as well as the Carrie Nation Room. According to historical documents, a woman hanged herself in the bathroom of that room, and many guests staying there have come out of the room clutching their necks and having a hard time breathing. The hotel has brought several famous guests over the years, including former US President Grover Cleveland, who stayed there in between his 2 terms as president, along with Carrie Nation, Robert Louis Stevenson, Charles Curtis, Kirstie Alley, John Sullivan, Sam Rayburn, and Harry Langdon. Due to the amount of paranormal activity and active spirits in this hotel, the hotel hosts several paranormal and haunted events throughout the year, and many ghost hunters come to Halton to check out the more than century-old hotel. It's also been featured in many television shows, including Ghost Tours of Kansas and Haunted Rooms America. Coming in at number 2, we have McIntyre Villa. The McIntyre Villa is one of the unusual and historic houses built in the city of Atchison. It was built in 1889 for John McIntyre, a wealthy manufacturer of harnesses and saddles. He did a great deal of business with wagon trains plying the overland trails. John McIntyre's first wife, Alice, died in 1892. He married his second wife, Anna Conlon, a widow with 3 sons, and after John's death in 1902, Anna continued living in the home until her death in 1916. During her ownership, the house was home to many of her relatives, with lots of children as well. Around 1925, Anna's brother, Judge Charles J. Conlon, a prominent Atchison lawyer, and his family made the villa their home. In 1952, the McIntyre Villa was purchased by Miss Isabel Altus, a retired professional violinist and eccentric. She lacked the financial resources to be able to restore the home, and shortly before her death, she sold the home to George Gerardi in 1969, who started to rehabilitate the old estate. Many people, past and present, who have lived in and visited the home have experienced many paranormal experiences. There have been figures being seen in windows when no one is home, lights turning on and off in the tower which doesn't have electricity, a speaker getting thrown off the counter, and boxes mysteriously moving on their own. Sounds of slamming doors throughout the night, footsteps walking down the hallway on the 2nd floor throughout the night, the feeling of being watched, drastic temperature changes, voices, the scent of a woman's perfume, and the hunt of cigarettes. The number of encounters and confirmed hauntings seen and heard around this home is crazy, and it's considered to be one of the most active paranormal homes in all of the US. The amount of activity in this home makes it a hub for investigators, mediums, psychics, and ghost hunters. They offer ghost tours of the home, and you can stay overnight to try and encounter these spirits. And finally, in at number 1, we have Cely House. The Cely House is said to be the most haunted place in Kansas. This home was built in the turn of the century and is located in the city of Atchison. After being built, the home was bought by the Atchison physician who worked from his home. The front served as an office space and examination rooms, and the upstairs is where the doctor and his family lived. One day, a frantic mother arrived at the home carrying her young daughter Sally. The child had collapsed from severe abdominal pain. The doctor diagnosed appendicitis, but there was no time to delay surgery. Sally unfortunately passed away on the operating table. For years after, many believe Sally stayed to haunt the home, and the haunting grew infamous in 1993 when the house was rented to a young couple. It started when the couple's dog would growl at nothing and make even louder growls when near the upstairs nursery. Things began to take a violent turn when fires broke out in the house and a series of sinister attacks on the husband began. The former operating area would feel extremely cold, and objects would visibly move when the young man came close. He could feel scratches on his chest and abdomen, but the ghost never attacked the wife or baby. Not only did the former residents experience the paranormal activity, but locals and other visitors of the home have experienced objects moving on their own, mysterious coldness, physical touches, video and investigative equipment that stopped working, trained guide dogs refusing to enter the nursery, and unexplained scratches or bruising on their bodies during and after their visits. Psychics have visited the home, and many have confirmed the presence of spirits in the home and have even communicated with them, and many have entered as skeptics and left believers. waivers. Due to the number of experiences in the home, it's gained a lot of media coverage from television channels including A&E, the Travel Channel, the Discovery Channel, and the Sci-Fi Channel. The home is not currently occupied but holds many guided ghost tours for both daytime and even overnight visits for the ghost lovers and paranormal investigators. Beware though, because a waiver is required due to the potential for personal injury, but no serious injuries have been reported since the last tenants in 1993. Coming in at number 5, we have Castle Stewart. Magnificently situated on the Moray Firth near Inverness, the 5-star Castle Stewart is a sight to behold. A mere 7 miles from the heart of Inverness, Castle Stewart is an ideally located base from which to explore the scenic and historic Highlands of Scotland. Walk the battlements with the ghost of Charles I before he lost his kingdom and his head, or with Bonnie Prince Charlie the night before his tragic defeat at nearby Culloden Moor. The property was held by the Macintoshes but was given by Mary, Queen of Scots, to James Stewart, Earl of Moray. Moray was made regent for James VI but was later assassinated. During the time that Stewart lived in the castle for an unknown reason, local residents began to spread the rumour that the castle was haunted. To disprove the theory, James Stewart offered a reward to anyone willing to spend a night in the castle. A local minister accepted the challenge and stayed in a room at the top of the East Tower. Stewart was hopeful that once the minister told the people that the tower was not haunted, the word of the castle being haunted would not spread. The next morning, however, he was found dead in the courtyard with a look of terror on his face. It was never explained what had happened to him and no killer was ever found. At some point in the night, he had either jumped from the window of the tower or he had been pushed. This only cemented the fear that the castle was in fact cursed. From that day, the locals refused to enter the castle grounds. It lay dormant for around 300 years until it was refurbished and turned into the hotel that we know today. Guests who have stayed there since it reopened have experienced a number of hauntings. Staff have heard disembodied footsteps on the stairs at midnight, horrible screams, and the ghost of a headless man was seen prowling the corridors. Some people have seen a figure pass their window too fast for them to make sense of it, but caught a glimpse in their eye as if someone had fallen from the tower above. The reviews of the hotel prove that guests are convinced the hauntings are real, but they also claim to have enjoyed the stay. If you like being terrified by ancient spirits or tormented by lost souls, this might be the place for you. In at number 4, we have Chillingham Castle in Chillingham. Chillingham Castle is a 13th century stronghold famed for action and battles. With its fine rooms, gardens, lakes, fountains, and tea rooms, the castle has an extraordinary ownership bloodline which runs back to the 1200s. Chillingham occupied a strategic position during Northumberland's bloody border feuds. Chillingham Castle was often under attack and often basked in the patronage of royal visitors, a tradition that remains to this day. Edward VIII came to hunt there, and members of today's royal family continue the tradition with private visits to the castle this century. The medieval castle remains as it was, just with galleries that you can see today added in Tudor days. For the visit of King James VI of Scotland, the castle is a dark past at the hands of the once owner John Sage. Once injured, he could no longer fight for the king. He begged to be kept on in some capacity. He was given the job of torturer and stepped into his new role with relish. It was said that he had a deep hatred for the Scots and little mercy, with over 7,500 men, women and children suffering an agonizing end at his hands. Often legs and arms were broken before they were thrown 20 feet down into the oubliette. With no way to escape, they were to eventually starve and pass away in pain and in fear. It was also said that John Sage met with an equally gruesome death after he accidentally killed a tribesman's daughter that he had been in love with. The father exacted his revenge and John was executed at Chillingham, with parts of his body being taken as souvenirs, a fitting end to a life dedicated to such cruelty. One of the most famous ghosts is the ghost of the Blue Boy, often witnessed by flashes of blue light or halo. These sightings settled down when 2 skeletons, one of a man and the other a young boy, were uncovered during renovation work. They even found documents with the remains dating back to the Armada. Who they were and why they were hidden remains a mystery. Some of the smaller hauntings guests reported including footsteps being heard walking around the rooms and the taps turning on by themselves. Another common sighting includes those of the Lady in White, who, after suffering from being poisoned, begged guests for water in the pantry. These are just a couple of the ghosts and hauntings around the castle. If you're brave enough to investigate, you might find a few more. In at number 3, the Swan Hotel in Suffolk. This luxury 4-star hotel is set in the middle of the historic Tudor town of Lavenham. In the heart of Suffolk, its oak beam red-themed interior makes for a cozy feel, giving guests a sense of stepping back in time. It's said that a housekeeper who once lived there back when the hotel was a thriving coaching inn back in the 19th century fell pregnant out of wedlock. The baby's father was happy to marry the lady under the circumstances and promised to look after them both. However, on the wedding day the gentleman had second thoughts and left the pregnant lady standing at the altar. Savage. It is said that after that she became inconsolable and very depressed. What is now room 15 in the Swan Hotel was once the housekeeping quarters, and it is said that the poor woman was found hanging in this room by one of the inn's workers. Her ghost remains behind to chill the spines of those that dared to cross her path. A security guard was working alone late one night at the Swan Hotel, and as he was doing his final checks around the hotel, he came into contact with her, which scared him out of his wits and sent him running in the other direction. Several guests have reported having seen her standing in room 15 in the middle of the night. Once a nun was staying in that very room when she awoke, startled to feel the ghost tickling her feet. I guess you either get lucky and she likes you, or she chooses to scare you half to death. In at number 2 we have the Langham in London. One of the more upmarket entries on this list is the Langham in London. I know it's upmarket because Cher stayed there. How do I know? Because I stalk her live. Since opening in 1865, this 5-star hotel has played host to a number of infamous historical figures, both living and dead. With nearly 500 rooms and suites, it's really not surprising that a number of ghosts have been seen regularly at the hotel. The paranormal activity at the hotel became apparent when it was owned by the BBC, when it was discovered that there were at least 5 ghosts that make regular appearances at the hotel. The most active of the ghosts at the hotel is said to be that of a German prince or nobleman who was thought to have met his death when he threw himself out of the window of an upper story room. Ghosts have seen his ghostly form moving through walls and closed doors, and he is often accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature. Room 333 is supposed to be the most haunted. In this room, a BBC newscaster woke up to see a fluorescent ball of light which slowly took a human shape. The apparition hovered 2 feet above the floor, the lower portion of its legs missing. It was dressed in extravagant Victorian evening wear. The announcer tried to communicate with the ghost, asking what it wanted. The spirit slowly started to move towards the newscaster, arms outstretched, eyes empty. The announcer fled in distress to the safety of his co-workers and told them of this encounter. A colleague accompanied him back to his room. The ghost was still there when they entered, but appeared less visible and less threatening before slowly fading away. Other BBC staff reported seeing the apparition in the same room, though only in October. There have been reports from other famous guests that taps will turn on in the night then turn off when investigated. Many people often struggle to sleep here and have to move rooms or even hotels. And finally, in at number 1 we have Malmaison in Oxford. This hotel is the most unique on this list. It was once a large prison located in Oxford. They have converted each cell into a hotel room. They have 95 rooms from you to choose from, starting with standard double house of correction to signature suite that is a 2-story of cells converted to a loft-style room. Oxford Castle functioned as Her Majesty's Prison Oxford from 1888 to 1996. One of the more notable prisoners to be held in Oxford Castle was Mary Blandy, an 18th century murderer who poisoned her father with arsenic. She believed the arsenic was a love potion that would force him to approve of her fiancé, a Scottish nobleman who was already married. She was hanged on April 6, 1752. It's said that her spirit still roams the castle to this day. During the Victorian era, it wasn't uncommon for children to be imprisoned inside. The youngest inmate to be held inside Oxford Prison was Julie Ann Crumpling. She was just 7 years old when she was sentenced to 7 days of hard labour for allegedly stealing a pram. Perhaps the most terrifying report comes from one of the security guards who was on his nightly patrol. The security has long been very wary of the location and had experienced several things before such an unexplained sounds, bangs, and the usual phenomena. However, on one dark night when the guards was coming to an end of his patrol, when his dog stopped and shuffled quickly backwards, growling at something in front of him. It was then 2 large shadow figures appeared before him. As anyone would do, he ran as fast as he could. A few days later, his dog died suddenly. He believed he had been frightened to death. You can stay in rooms when prisoners were once tortured and even killed. Although the hotel has been fitted to be a rather comfortable boutique hotel, it does not erase the horrors that have occurred. Sometime in the 1970s, a group were carrying out a sentence in one of the cells when poltergeist activity suddenly erupted. Things got so bad that a priest had to be called to exorcise whatever they had awoken. Would you dare stay here? I wouldn't, although maybe, we'll see. Coming in at number 5, Hotel Maestai's Premier Akasaka in Tokyo. The Maestai's Premier Akasaka was built on the site of the Akasaka Weekly Mansion. Since opening, the hotel has been linked to countless cases of people taking their own lives and sudden deaths that have reportedly taken place at the former building. Since then, it is a common occurrence for guests to experience the paranormal. One of of the most common claims is that an eerie, white mist can be seen filling the rooms. No one knows where it comes from or why, but it can disappear as fast as it appears. There are also often reports of a woman appearing in some of the rooms. She has been seen in doorways or even at the foot of the bed. Guests have reported a cold hand stroking their hair or grabbing them while inside of their room. One woman was even dragged by her hair across her room. Electronical items also appeared to stop working while within the hotel, with some turning off and on mysteriously, then working normally again upon leaving the hotel. It seems like you'd be safe choosing another hotel in this area. I would not like to be dragged across my room while trying to enjoy my holiday. Coming in at number 4, we have Bourbon Orleans Hotel in New Orleans. When it opened in 1819, the Orleans Theatre and Ballroom became the setting for European operas and entertainment for Creole society in New Orleans. The 1,300-seat theatre quickly placed New Orleans on the map as the opera capital of the United States throughout the 19th century. By 1881, both the Orleans Theatre and Ballroom had been acquired by the Sisters of the Holy Family for use as a school, orphanage, and convent. The Sisters of the Holy Family were at the location for 83 years until the need for expansion pressed them to sell the property to hotel interests. The stories of the ghosts in the hotel seem to spread over each era of the hotel's history. There is something about the ground the hotel is built on that seems to keep spirits locked there. There is the story of the Confederate soldier. He is known around the hotel simply as the Man. He has been known to haunt both the 6th and 3rd floors. Many people have seen him standing around on these floors, and sometimes his footsteps can be heard walking around. A yellow fever hit New Orleans around the time that the nuns were running their convent. They cared for sick children who had been orphaned. Due to this, there are spirits of nuns and little girls who have been seen around the hotel. The most frequently told tale is of a little girl. You can hear her light footsteps walking around from time to time, and some have even seen her rolling her ball and chasing it down the 6th floor corridors. The final well-known ghost to inhabit the Bourbon is that of the Lonely Dancer. She has been seen dancing underneath the ballroom's crystal chandelier. Others have commented on how they could see someone stood behind the curtains within the ballroom, yet when they look to see who is hiding, no one is there. Seems she wants to be included in the lavish events, but must only watch from afar. In at number 3, we have Emily Morgan Hotel in San Antonio. Before the building was built, the grounds of what is now the hotel was where the Mexican forces battled the Texans in the long barracks of the Alamo in 1836. Over 600 men lost their lives on the land that the hotel now lives on. When originally built, the location was the Medical Arts Building. It housed over 100 medical professionals from doctors to dentists. It was even believed to have a section devoted to the care of those suffering from psychological conditions. The building also had a morgue and crematorium, providing for patients and their family from birth to end of life. Of course, with any old building that has witnessed death, the stories about what happened here continue to grow and interest those who visit. The staff and guests of the hotel have shared their stories about weird occurrences at the hotel. These moments of weirdness have led some to conclude the hotel is haunted. One example of this is the phone ringing in the middle of the night. Once answered, no one is there. Room attendants have also told stories of them cleaning the room, then once they go to clean the bathroom, they will re-enter the room to see that the bedding has been thrown around the room. That sucks. Guests have also reported unusual occurrences during their stays. Some have seen hospital gurneys outside of the room when looking through the peephole, only to see nothing there once the door is opened. Elevators will stop on random floors where there is no one waiting, as if it has been called by a spirit. Emily Morgan Hotel follows the traditional superstition of a lot of the other hotels and does not have a 13th floor. What many people do not know about the hotel is on the 14th floor there isn't a room 1408. The room number stops at 1407 by design, and the next room is the Duke Suite. When you add the numbers 1408 together, 1408, you get the number 13. Hence the movie 1408, starring John Cusack. Great movie, very scary. Coming in at number 2, we have the Bell Hotel in England. The Bell Hotel was built back in the 15th century. It was first established as an inn way back then and has seen many owners and guests pass through there in its time. Many paranormal investigators have revisited the hotel over the years and truly feel that the site is one of the most haunted in all of Norfolk and the UK. The Bell Hotel itself has been a hostelry since it was established some 16 centuries ago. Some of its period features include wattle and daub walls, Samson's Post, Elizabethan wall paintings, a priest's hole, and the original secret passage out of the inn. If you do happen to find yourself at the hotel, avoid the main suite bedroom. It is said that this room in particular is haunted by the ghost of a hooded monk, who either lived or stayed at the hotel in the past that had taken his own life in that very room. Guests have reported the feeling like they're being watched or a sudden unexplained chill in the air. The second most active ghost of the hotel is that of the old landlady Betty Radcliffe. The landlady died when she was pushed out the window of room 10. Her spirit told to never leave the hotel. Guests have reported her walking walking around at night checking on the hotel as she once did. Some report knocks on their door, but when they open to see who it is, no one is there. These are just the known ghosts of the hotel. After more than 6 centuries in business, who's to know who or what else is trapped within its walls? And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Dragsholm Castle, Denmark. Dragsholm Slot is one of the oldest buildings in Denmark. The original Dragsholm Castle was built around 1215 by the Bishop of Roskilde. During the Middle Ages, the building was modified from the original palace to a fortified castle. During the Count's feud in 1534, it was so strong that it was the only castle on Zealand to withstand the armies of Count Christopher. In connection with the Reformation, Dragsholm was confiscated by the crown along with all the property of the Catholic Church. As crown land during the period from 1536 to 1664, Dragsholm Castle was used as a prison for noble and ecclesiastical prisoners. Among the prisoners were a number of rather famous inmates such as Joachim Ronno, that old gem, who was the last Catholic Bishop of Roskilde and ironically once owned the place, and James Hepburn, 4th Earl of Bothwell and 3rd husband to Mary, Queen of Scots. James Hepburn is the first ghost to haunt Dragsholm Castle. He was arrested when his boat had to stop in Denmark due to a storm for not having the correct identification papers. Some of his past misdemeanors caught up with him in the shape of an influential jilted former fiancée whose dowry he had run off with, coupled with the fact that it was known the English were keen to catch up with him regarding the murder of his current wife's second husband. The legend says that Hepburn went insane during the 10 years he was locked inside Dragsholm Castle. He spent the time pacing around his pillar until, when he died in April 1578, he had worn a circular groove in the floor that can still be seen to this day. Even though his body was removed from the castle, his spirit remains behind. The ghost of the Earl is heard rather than seen. People report the sounds of horses' hooves in the courtyard, sometimes accompanied by a fully loaded carriage. At some point in the 1930s, while repairing the plumbing, the workmen made a gruesome discovery. At this point, there had already been sightings of a ghostly maiden around the grounds. The tale goes that she was the daughter of one of the many owners of the castle. It would have been totally unacceptable for a lady of aristocracy to strike up a relationship with a commoner, but the young lady, who may have been Selina Bovels, fell in love with the man who worked at the castle. Their secret affair was rumbled by her father, who in a rage not only locked her in a prison cell in the tower, but went so far as to brick her up inside of the wall. When the plumbers tore down the wall, they discovered her remains. People now make the link that this must be the ghostly maiden. She can often be seen around the grounds searching, possibly for her lost lover. Others have heard crying that they can never place. Could there be more hidden bones around the castle? I won't be staying there to find out. Coming in at number 5, we have Ballygally Castle. The Ballygally Castle is said to be one of the most haunted places in Ireland and is haunted by many different ghosts. The haunted castle is in the village of Ballygally in Northern Ireland and overlooks the sea at the head of Ballygally Bay. The castle was built in 1625 by James Shaw of Scotland, but now is run as a hotel. The most well-known ghost is that of Lady Isabella Shaw, or nicknamed the Ghost of Ballygally. Legend has it that her husband Lord James locked her away in a tower where she was supposedly pushed to her death. She is said to roam the halls of the castle looking for her child, who was taken away from her at birth from her cruel husband, Lord James. Many people who stay in the castle say that they are woken up throughout the night due to her knocking on their bedroom doors. The tourists often climb the spiral staircase to view the ghost room where Lady Isabella lived out her final days. In 2003, one of the managers of the hotel, Olga Henry, was once a skeptic of ghosts and paranormal activity. But after spending some time working at the hotel, she stated that she believes there is definitely something in the hotel. According to Olga, one guest was staying in one of the rooms in the tower beneath the popular ghost room, and in the middle of the night he had awoken suddenly, believing he was at home and one of his children had laid a hand on his back. He woke up and said that he could hear a child running around the room and laughing, but he couldn't see anyone around. So he ran out of the room and into the lobby. He was so terrified from what he had experienced and checked out right away and never returned to the hotel again. In December of 2003, Olga was setting up the dungeon room in the tower for guests arriving for a meal. She set up the tables neatly, then locked the room before leaving. Just before the guests were set to arrive, she went back into the room and the tables were now a mess with unfolded napkins and glasses with an unusual scum around them, and were now arranged in a circle on the table. Several paranormal investigators and mediums have come to the castle to investigate over the years. A group of mediums that spent the night at the hotel had reported that they had detected more ghosts than there were guests staying at the hotel at the time. In at number 4, we have Liamonay Castle. Liamonay Castle has an extremely sinister history and is haunted by a woman known as the Red Mary. This castle was originally a basic 5-story Irish tower house which was built around 1480 by a member of the O'Brien family, who were one of the last of the High Kings of Ireland and a direct descendant of Brian Boru. In 1639, Conor O'Brien married a woman named Mary Ní Mahone, and she became one of the most famous women in Irish folklore who, due to her flaming red hair, was commonly known as Red Mary. She was born in 1615 and she was married before Conor, but her previous husband died mysteriously and she gained control of his fortune. Due to the fortune, the newlyweds built a large mansion onto the Tower House. In 1651, Conor O'Brien died in battle and the Red Mary married once again, and again, and again. It is believed that she had been married a total of 25 times. After the Red Mary died, the castle had various occupants in later years until it fell into ruins at the end of the 18th century, and lays abandoned to this day. But it's often visited by ghost hunters and paranormal investigators. It's believed that the Red Mary haunts the castle after her death to this very day. Mary was said to have a foul temper, and if her servants were to displease her, they would be hung out of one of the castle windows, the men by their necks and the women by their hair, until they passed away. It's even said if the maids didn't learn to do whatever the Red Lady said, then she would injure them so heavily they would bleed. After her death, it's not known exactly where she is buried, but many think she is beside the castle, and locals and tourists claim to have seen an eerie womanly figure walking the halls of the castle, often looking out the windows, giving this castle the name of being one of the most haunted Irish castles. In at number 3 we have the Crum. Located in Northern Ireland, Crumlin Road, Gal, or so often called the Crum, is reportedly one of the most haunted places in Belfast. This former prison was built in the Victorian era and was designed by Sir Charles Lanyon in 1845. It is their only Victorian era prison remaining in Northern Ireland and was one of the most advanced prisons of its day. This prison held some of the most dangerous and mentally ill people in all of Ireland, and many prisoners passed away while staying here, and they believed to haunt the building to this day. The prison had brutal conditions, and children were even held there as young as 6 for petty crimes like stealing food. This prison held executions, and the first known execution was done in 1854 to a man named Robert Henry O'Neill. It's believed over 20 people, including Robert, had been buried in unmarked graves within the grounds of the Gaol. These executions were a public demonstration, were held in crowds of up to 20,000 people to watch. Later in 1901, there was an execution chamber built, and the most dangerous prisoners were sent to this notorious prison to be executed. After closing its doors in 1996, it is now used for events and conferences, and during the Halloween season, it's open to ghost hunting experiences and for paranormal investigators. This infamous prison is featured on the list of the world's most notorious historic prisons, and tourists continue to flock here due to the amount of paranormal activity and ghost sightings over the years. In at number 2 we have Malahide Castle. The Malahide Castle lies in the village of Malahide just north of Dublin and dates back to the 12th century. The estate began in 1185 when Richard Talbot was granted the lands of Malahide, and it was home to the Talbot family for 791 years until 1976. The castle was eventually inherited by the 7th Baron Talbot, and in 1973 it was passed down after his death to Rose, his sister. Then in 1976 the castle and its grounds were sold to the Irish state. Nowadays the castle is used as a concert venue, tourist attraction and banquet events. It also features a popular botanical garden, sports ground, golf course, tennis court and a children's playground. The castle's best known rooms are the Oak Room and the Great Hall, which display Talbot family history and are known to be visited often by paranormal investigators. The tragic story of a murdered jester named Puck is the most notable ghost who haunts the castle. Stories say he had fallen in love with one of the Malahide prisoners, Lady Eleanor Fitzgerald. Puck was found out when he was stabbed in the heart, ultimately dying, but with his last breath he swore to haunt the castle for all of eternity. Locals and tourists see the ghost of Puck roaming the castle grounds. It's also believed that many members of the Talbot family also haunt the castle. When in the late 1700s, 14 members of the family sat down for breakfast in the Great Hall, and then later that night all 14 people were suspiciously found dead. It is rumoured to be one of the most haunted castles in Ireland. The castle's residents, workers and visitors have all reported similar eerie happenings, and you can learn about all of the different ghost hauntings on the very popular ghost tours, including Puck. And finally, in at number 1 we have Grace Neal's Bar. Not only are castles and buildings haunted in Ireland, but there is an Irish pub by the name of Grace Neal's Bar that is a popular haunted place. This Irish pub is located in County Down and was built in 1611 and is one of the oldest bars in Ireland. Originally this bar was called the King's Arms when it was first established, until it was taken over by Grace Neal. Grace spent years serving drinks to the bar goers. She was known to greet every guest with a kiss on the cheek and a hug, and she was described as having a strong spirit. It's believed by many many that her ghost has stuck around the bar ever since her death in 1916. Cold spots are felt around this warm atmosphere, and some have reported seeing a ghostly figure of a Victorian-era woman wandering around the front bar. The current owners of the bar often hear sweeping noises, footsteps and glasses and cups have fallen suddenly off the shelves for seemingly no reason. Not only is Grace the only spirit haunting the bar, staff members of the bar have regularly seen shadowy figures of men passing by in the upstairs area. Several different ghost hunters have visited the 400-year-old pub in order to try and find answers for the unexplained sighting, including medium Derek Ackera and the most haunted team. One ghost hunter, Mike Hirons, believes he had come across an evil spirit when he was investigating the bar. He stated that the anomaly appeared before him as a ball of light upstairs and was very evil and unpleasant. Spirits suck the energy from people, and he claimed to get very out of breath, and all his energy was drawn out when he was investigating the bar. Grace Neal's bar is known to be among one of the most haunted bars in the world, and the most haunted in all of Ireland. In at number 5 we have Ross Castle. The Ross Castle is one of the most haunted places in all of Ireland. It's located on the edge of Loughliney and Killarney National Park in County Kerry. It was built in the late 15th century by the local ruling clan, the O'Donohues, then changed ownership to the McCarthys in 1580, and finally it was leased out to Sir Valentine Brown. But then in 1688 they were exiled after the Glorious Revolution. The castle then became a military barracks, which remained so until the early 19th century. The Browns never came back but did build the Kenmare House near Killarney. Legend has it that Mr. O'Donoghue jumped or was sucked out of the window of the grand chamber at the top of the castle and disappeared into the waters of the lake along with his horse, his table and his library. It's believed that Mr. O'Donoghue now lives in a great palace at the bottom of the lake where he keeps a close eye on his home and haunts many of the newcomers and tourists that visit the castle to this day. Another story is that in 1536 one of the owners of the castle was Richard Nugent, who was nicknamed the Black Baron, and he had a daughter named Sabina. When Sabina was on a walk along the water by her home, she encountered a man named Orwin, who was the son of an O'Reilly chieftain who was the sworn enemy of the Black Baron. They chatted for a while and they swore to meet again. Over time they met every day in secrecy and soon fell in love, but they knew they could never be together because of the feud between their families. Sounds like Romeo and Juliet. With no hope for them in sight, they just decided to elope. One night they met again, decided to flee together, and they boarded a boat and started traveling down the lake when a storm came out of nowhere. The waves became too much for them and the boat flipped. Orwin unfortunately drowned because of this. Sabina did survive, but knowing her lover was gone, she locked herself up in the castle's tower, didn't eat or drink until she fell into a deep sleep to never wake up again and finally be with Orwin again. Sabina eventually did pass away because of this, and to this day she continues to haunt the castle. Visitors and guests make frequent encounters with her spirit, saying she is still searching for her lover so they can reunite again. And the Black Baron's presence has also been reported by visitors in and around the castle on numerous occasions. Many tourists have frequently reported waking up numerous times throughout the night, hearing sounds of doors shutting on their own and whispering noises. Few others have also said they feel an eerie presence sitting next to them while in bed. Coming in at number 4 we have Castle Leslie. Castle Leslie is a massive castle that was home to the Leslie clan, and the Castle Leslies lay on a private 1,000-acre country estate located in County Monaghan. The Leslie family has lived in the estate since 1665, when the land was purchased and given to John Leslie by King Charles II. So he moved in and he lived in the castle with his wife Anita and family. Many tourists and guests have recalled seeing many unexplained things throughout the castle, but the Red Room in particular was the most haunted of the entire castle. It was the centre of the family life at the castle for centuries, especially because it was where Anita Leslie King gave birth to her daughter Leonie in this room. Many of the family throughout living in this castle claim to see people, hear things and feel ghostly presence in the room. Due to so many people going in and out of the Red Room, it makes sense that it's the most haunted of all rooms in the castle. It's believed that Anita had died in the room, and you can apparently see her and John both walking around the estate trying to find each other and be together again. The castle is now used as a hotel room, and each room is named after members of the Leslie family. So if you ever want to come in contact with members of the late Leslie family, many of their ghosts are seen in their specific rooms, and you can book your stay in any room in the castle, even the Red Room. Not only is it a very popular tourist spot and a hotspot for paranormal investigators, but in 2002 it gained media attention when Sir Paul McCartney married Heather Mills in the church, which is located on the estate. Also, various members of the Churchill family family have visited the castle due to family ties they have with the Leslies. In at number 3 we have Clifton Castle. Clifton Castle is located in County Galway and was built in 1818 for John Darcy, who was a local landowner and the owner of the town of Clifton. He had a castle built for him and his large family while he was busy building up the town, and it's where they all stayed for the next 2 decades. In 1839 John died and his oldest son Hyacinth inherited the estate, but everything went downhill in 1845 when famine hit. As hunger struck, the tenants of the Darcy estate gathered on the lawn of the castle to beg and plea for work or food. However, they couldn't get anything and many of them died of starvation on the castle grounds. After the family's death, many peasants moved to the remains of the castle for shelter, but many of the poor died here. It's believed that the family's spirits can still be seen and heard on the property, and many of the peasants' ghosts are located in around the property as well. The castle has remained abandoned since around 1894, but remains a hotspot for tourists and paranormal investigators. Many believe to have seen ghost-like figures and hearing weird noises when they have been inside the castle. It's believed you can still see John Darcy roaming in and around the castle looking for food for himself and his family. The castle is also a popular attraction during the Halloween season because of the ghost sightings and paranormal activity. If you're brave enough to visit, you can do so and be joined by a tour guide to tell you everything about the castle, ghost sightings, and history of the Clifton Castle. In at number 2 we have Belvelly Castle. The Belvelly Castle is located in the county Cork, which is next to the small village of Belvelly. It was initially built by the Anglo-Norman Hodnet family, who were an ambitious family who arrived in Ireland during the 12th century. The Hodnet and De Barry families were in conflict at the time, and it resulted in the De Barrys and their allies, the Roaches, capturing the castle for themselves and renaming it Barrymore. Then later on, Sir Walter Raleigh gained ownership of the castle. During the 1800s, the castle fell into ruins after many years of being abandoned. It's believed that a faceless woman haunts the castle to this day, and it's Anglo-Norman Hodnet's wife, Margaret. The story says that she had an on and off relationship with a local lord named Clon Rockenby, who had asked for her hand in marriage on many occasions, but she refused. Clon was humiliated and decided to raise a small army to go to the castle and take Margaret by force. The Hodnets fought back against Clon and his men, and a standoff began for an entire year. When Clon finally was able to enter the castle, he was shocked to see the state of Margaret. She was starved and looked like a skeleton basically, a shadow of her former self. Clon was enraged and smashed her favourite mirror to pieces. Margaret was known for her love of mirrors to remind her of her renowned beauty, and at the time mirrors were a status symbol with the wealthy. After seeing the mirror shatter, one of the Hodnets killed Clon with a sword. After these events, Margaret descended into insanity. She was said to have sought out mirrors constantly to check if her beauty had returned. Apparently there is one stone on the castle's wall which had been rubbed smooth over the years, said to be the spot where her favourite mirror used to hang. Because she never got her beauty back, she now haunts the castle after passing away, faceless, looking for mirrors around the castle. Many tourists and locals have seen the faceless woman in and around the castle walls. And finally, in at number 1 we have Charleville Castle. The Charleville Castle is a Gothic style castle and is located in County Offaly. It was built by Thomas More in 1641, and the estate was passed through the hands of Charles More, Lord Tullamore, who was the grandson of Thomas, and when he died in 1674 it went to Jane, then to Charles William Berry. The original mansion was extended into the beautiful castle it is today. Commissioned in 1798, was designed by Francis Johnston, and was built between 1800 and 1812. The most famous of the ghost scene is that of the little girl named Lady Harriet, who died after a fall off a staircase in the castle. Another ghost scene is Lady Harriet's uncle Henry Walter, who died at the age of 7 from influenza. Although he died in London, his body was brought to Ireland and he was buried in the family vault. The volunteers describe Henry and Harriet as terrible twins, as these spirits seem to be very mischievous, and there is even a famous picture taken in the castle that shows a shadowy little boy. The library that is located in the castle is said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. People who have visited the library have witnessed a dark shadowy form of an older person on the grounds coming from the door, so the children aren't the only ghosts located in the castle. The Charleville Castle has been claimed to be the most haunted building and grounds in all of Europe. It appeared on many TV shows like Most Haunted, Scariest Places on Earth, and Ghost Hunter International. It was also the location for many movies like Becoming Jane, Northanger Abbey, and The Green Knight. It's a huge haunted attraction and has been visited by many different psychics and paranormal investigators.
Number 5 on this list is Stivers School for the Arts. This is a high school that's attracted hosted hundreds of artistic students from around the region for years. It's apparently a really good school, however, ever since a murder back in the 1920s, it's been deeply haunted. AGC writes, according to the online magazine Dayton Most Metro, a teacher named Mary Tyler was found dead in the pool with a locket in one hand and a broken pointer in the other. The teacher was reportedly involved with a senior student at the time of her death. He disappeared after her body was found and was never seen again. Officials believe the unnamed student tore his picture out of the teacher's locket so nobody would suspect him, according to the writer Julian Heisler. The school eventually covered over the pool, building a classroom on top of it. A trap door still leads down into the pool, which is used for storage now, Heisler said, but it seems Mary Tyler never left. Students and maintenance staff have reported Tyler's ghostly figure levitating in the abandoned pool and floating about the lower levels and the network of tunnels buried underneath the school, banging on pipes and wailing loudly wherever she goes, Dayton Most Metro reported. A floating dead body. Yeah, that sounds pretty haunted to me, guys. Ever since this ghostly incident, there have been tons of spooky moments reported by students. Lights flickering, temperature changes, items mysteriously moving around by themselves, and things of this nature happening regularly at this school. It's crazy that something that went down 100 years ago still has such a hold over this place, but literally a century later and we still haven't shaken the ghost of Mary Tyler. Hopefully the next century is a little bit less scary for the students at Stiver School for the Arts. Number 4 on this list is the Cleveland Federal Reserve. The Cleveland Federal Reserve is where the money is. Now this isn't a comment on people being haunted by crippling debt, even though that's probably the most realistic thing I've ever said on this channel. No, this place is haunted by an actual poltergeist that you don't want to mess with. Matilda is the name of our ghost in question, and she's said to haunt the vault down below. Now the good thing about this place is that you actually can't even get to the haunted area. So even for those of you who are feeling daring, you aren't going to be able to go and visit Matilda because it's off limits to the public. Matilda used to work here and was deeply involved in the stock market. That's why when the market suffered a horrible crash in 1929, Matilda felt trapped and saw no other way than to take her own life. She did so in this building, and now it is forever haunted by her spirit passing through the underground walls, scaring all of those who work down there. It's hard to know how accurate this haunting really is because we don't really have any proof of it. That, however, is more due to the fact that it's super off limits and super well guarded vault that nobody can get to. If we can trust the verbal accounts of the people who've run into her, and there have been many, then we should definitely fear this vault. Number 3 on this list is Crybaby Bridge. This is definitely one of the most famous spots in the state when it comes to hauntings. This one specifically is the Rogues Hollow Crybaby Bridge and has a pretty sad and scary history. There are 2 legends that could be true in regards to this bridge. The first one says that the mother of a newborn child had a falling out with her lover. He abandoned her and she fell into a deep depression. She responded by throwing her newborn over the bridge and then followed that by throwing herself over as well. The second legend says that 2 parents of a newborn child were driving down the road. They got to the bridge, and on that bridge their car spun out on some black ice. The car crashed into a tree right after the bridge, killing both of the parents. The baby in the back of the car survived though, at least for a time. This road doesn't get traveled on often, and it was very cold that evening. When people eventually did come upon the crash, it was too late. Ever since this incident happened, this bridge has been rightfully avoided by the locals. The horrible sound of a baby crying can be heard echoing throughout the river that it passes over. They say that standing on this bridge for too long, it's not good for your brain or your mental state. That your sanity will slowly slip away from you, and any happiness and good feelings that you may have had will be sucked away down that river for good. Not a bridge that you should want to go down at all, so avoid it altogether. Number 2 on this list is Squire's Castle. So calling this place a castle is a bit of a stretch, because the castle was never actually built. News 5 Cleveland says, located in the North Chagrin Reservation of the Cleveland Metro Parks, this castle is a reflection of the builder Fergus B. Squires, who was a founding member of the Standard Oil Company. The actual castle was never built, so what it's standing on today was the shell of the gatekeeper's house for the estate. Legend has it that Fergus's wife, Rebecca, was very much a city girl who wanted nothing to do with nature. Stories say Rebecca was walking up the stone stairs when she became startled by something outside her window. In a panicked state, she dropped her lantern and tumbled to her death down the cold stone staircase. Ever since this tragedy happened, Rebecca's ghost has never left, haunting all of those who visit or stay at the estate and bemoaning her unfortunate fate. The thing is that she isn't the thing that most people are scared of. It's whatever the thing was that frightened Rebecca so much that she fell to her death. Rumor has it that there could be a werewolf-like beast roaming the estate. Dark red eyes have been seen in the night at afar, and the howls of some wolf-like creature have also been reported. Is it possible that Rebecca saw this werewolf so many years ago and that's what frightened her? Maybe she isn't trying to haunt the place at all, but actually trying to scare people away from this place so the same fate doesn't happen to them. Either way, I don't recommend going. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Lorraine Palace Theater. You know, for once, it would be really nice to go see some theater without fearing for your life. Sadly, you aren't gonna get that at the Lorraine Palace Theater. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution writes, "The Lorraine Palace Theater opened in 1928 in Lorain, Ohio, near Cleveland. It seats just over 1,700 guests and was the first movie theater in the state to show talking pictures, according to the theater's website." Dave Hensley, a paranormal researcher and the founder of EVP Mediums, told the Chronicle-Telegram after investigating the palace that there are so many spirits there he couldn't even count them all. "We got a name from a gentleman named Ed who said that he worked at the shipyard. That's profound because the shipyard was directly behind the palace. He claimed that he was murdered pushed downstairs," Henley said. "There was a spirit who said that he died of drugs as well. And we had spirits that were killed in the 1924 tornado that hit Lorraine. That was pretty emotional," one of them said. "My body flew," Henslett told the Chronicle. The theater's operation director told the newspaper most people in the area probably know about the ghosts and spirits that roam the palace's hallways. "I think everybody in Lorain County has been privy to the rumors of the unexplained activity in the Lorraine Palace Theater," Chris Pataki said. In fact, a documentary on the haunted theater called Ghosts of the Palace is scheduled to debut at the movie house this weekend. Pretty ballsy move right there, guys, literally screening a movie about your haunted theater in said haunted theater. All of this though should make it very clear how haunted this place actually is. Literally everybody around this area knows about this spot. And whenever you're getting a full-on movie made about how specifically haunted you are, then you know that you've made it as a haunted location. Even though most people make it out of this theater unscathed, that can't be said for everybody. Attacks have been reported and left people feeling very emotionally and even physically scarred. Netflix is a thing for a reason now, guys. Let's use it. Number 5 on this list is Cleveland Greys Armory Museum. This building was constructed in 1893 for the Cleveland Greys, who were a volunteer private military company. The group helped law enforcement and dealt with other criminal ongoings that attacked the city's streets. They continued helping out the military for as long as the government would allow them to, but after World War I were no longer allowed to enter as a private group. However, they obviously had a lot of weapons and things of that nature that nobody would be using anymore. So today, they're now stands the Cleveland Greys Armory Museum. These guns and cannons don't stand alone though, as there are ghosts living among these walls as well. Disembodied voices and things moving when they're not supposed to are all very common occurrences at the Cleveland Greys Armory Museum. The legend actually became so famous that this place was featured on Ghost Hunters, where they investigated the building and determined that this place is in fact haunted. However, luckily for us, and a reason why you still might be able to go to this place, is that the ghosts are supposedly out there for a good time. These professionals determine that the ghosts are not fueled by anger, but just chilling out in the museum and living their best ghostly lives. Still though, there are many apparitions of military men who will appear, as well as ghostly footsteps and sounds that just don't make any sense at all. It's all very creepy, even if the ghosts are only out for fun. It would probably be a pretty cool place to check out, just make sure that you aren't faint of heart. Number 4 on this list is Erie Street Cemetery. This is apparently one of the spookiest places in the state and not a spot that you should want to be burying your loved ones. Only in your state writes, in 1826, this charming cemetery was established on East 9th Street, though it was known as Erie Street at the time. Before then, a community burial ground was maintained near modern-day Public Square. Expansion, of course, eventually caught up with the cemetery, and it's now right across the street from Progressive Field. This growth once threatened the cemetery's existence as bodies were removed from the cemetery in the early 1900s to make space for the new development. This preparation was shut down when the Pioneers Memorial Association was founded, so the burial grounds remains, yet it now feels oddly out of place. Perhaps one of the most unforgettable stories is that of Jock Ossaut, also known as Walking Bear. Jock Ossaut was the proud chief of the Mesquekai, a tribe that existed in Iowa. Following the conclusion of the Black Hawk War, Jock Ossaut came out east to hunt. He made the acquaintance of Dan Marble and joined his theater troupe, traveled to England, and even came into the favor of Queen Victoria. However, he fell ill and parted ways with the troupe. Legend maintains that Jock Ossaut was making his way home to his ancestral lands, anticipating his demise, but that he passed in Cleveland before he reached his intended destination. As a result, local myth maintains Jock Ossaut remains eternally restless. His local friends like Dr. Horace Ackley arranged for his burial in Erie Street Cemetery. His dismay at being unable to return home caused him to crack his stone grave marker. This ghost has been spotted so many times and haunts those who pass by here. He's even said to haunt the Cleveland Guardians baseball park, which is just across the street from this cemetery. His ghost is forever restless and just wants to get home, but I'm not sure that he ever will though. Number 3 on this list is South Bass Island Lighthouse. Located in South Bass Island on Lake Erie, this lighthouse and the island it's on is honestly rather beautiful. Super cute and super quaint, it's kind of like the place that you'd want to go for a day trip with your significant other. However, you may not want to take said significant other to the South Bass Lighthouse itself. It housed lighthouse keepers in the late 1800s. The weirdness began back in 1898 with Harry Riley, the lighthouse keeper, and his assistant Sam Anderson. Anderson was a bit of a weirdo. He was said to have captured snakes on the island and then bring them to the basement of the lighthouse where he kept a bunch of them. Anderson apparently lost his mind though during the time that he worked at this place. Apparently there was a small epidemic and he freaked out at the prospect of having to stay in quarantine. Triggering a little bit? It's thought that he took his own life by jumping off of the cliff portion of the island. Then later on, the lighthouse keeper Harry was found hopelessly mad running around the island like a lunatic. It was the two stories of these men that launched the legends of a haunting at this lighthouse. People are very scared of the lighthouse as they believe it to be haunted with some sort of demon that will make you go insane. A lovely and quaint little spot, but one that if you spend too much time at will literally have you lose your mind. Not to mention the ghosts of these two men have been spotted from time to time running around frantically, looking as if all their wits are totally gone. Number 2 on this list is Edwin Shaw Hospital. Edwin Shaw Hospital has truly seen it all, and it's no wonder that it's deeply haunted today. It initially opened in 1915 as a hospital specifically for tuberculosis. Then a few years later, a side wing opened up to care for pediatric patients. Needless to say, during these periods there was a lot of death that took place. Then in 1947, things changed drastically and became a place for abandoned children, those who lost their parents, or those who suffered. For the next few years of this place's operation, there were a decent amount of scandals that took place. Tons of reports of mistreatment of these children, with some patients even taking their own lives during this time. Eventually this became a psychiatric hospital as well, and as you can probably imagine, it saw its fair share of human rights violations and scary things. Now, this place is no more, it's completely demolished, but the area is still deeply haunted. Ohio Exploration went prior to its demolition in 2017 and saw its haunted nature firsthand. They write, "Of course, with such a rich and diverse history, it is no surprise that Edwin Shaw was said to be haunted. The spirits of not only the tuberculosis victims, there are 246 buried in the hospital cemetery, but also of those children who took their own lives and those who fell victim to ill fates were said to haunt the hospital and its grounds. Doors opened and closed by themselves, and sounds of spectral footsteps were often heard in the halls. The sounds of a meal being served in the mess hall were heard quite frequently, but upon inspection, the hall was completely empty. Ghostly humming and other odd sounds were heard in Sunshine Village, where the bulk of the paranormal activity was said to take place. The very careful, guys, of this place in Ohio. Number 1 on this list is Moonville Tunnel. Moonville Tunnel is a deeply haunted tunnel in Ohio that locals are perpetually afraid of. Jim Reed says, according to local legend, the ghost is that of a railroad worker who was crushed by an oncoming train in the spring of 1859. The newspaper article from the MacArthur Democrat dated March 31st, 1859 reads, a brakesman was fatally injured when the wheels passing over and grinding to a shapeless mass the greater part of one of his legs. Talk about graphic. Most who claim to have sighted the ghost of Moonville Tunnel say that he carries a lantern and is sometimes seen as a hovering orb of light. At least 4 other people were reported to have been killed at Moonville Tunnel as well, although the details, they kind of vary. Some legends claim that Moonville was struck by a plague and quarantine, and that the ghosts are of those killed by the epidemic. Others state that the ghost is that of a pregnant woman struck by a train, and still others claim that it was an 8-foot tall man who was struck. However, none of these legends are quite as popular as the initial one. This tunnel appears on tons of the most haunted Ohio lists, and it even has a pretty massive section on Wikipedia dedicated to how haunted it is. That can't be said for most other places, and just kind of leads to the legitimacy of these ghosts. On the Wikipedia page, there are also extensive stories about the Lavender Lady, the engineer, and the bully, who were all apparently characters that died due to this train many years ago. As Jim Reed mentioned earlier though, these are lesser legends, but still could have actually happened. Whatever or whoever is truly haunting this tunnel, it's clear that it probably isn't safe for us to be exploring. Avoid the Moonville Tunnel at all costs. Unless you're in a train, in that case, because considering how our ghosts became ghosts, you might actually be safe. Number 5 on this list is Sismaju Hotel. Located in Bucharest, this hotel was initially built over 100 years ago in 1912 and was first called the Palace Hotel. It was called this because it truly was a marvel back then and was one of the most beautiful spots in the country. The architect who built it owned the property until 1948 when it was ultimately taken by the state. This is where it was given the name that it has today. For the next 20 years or so, the hotel thrived and wasn't only just a spot for the super wealthy to vacation, but was also a spot of parliamentary meetings and other things of great importance. In 1970 though, this hotel shut down. It was simply a side effect of the communist wave that was sweeping through this part of the world, and therefore the hotel was neglected for 20 years until finally it reopened in 1990. It wasn't used as a hotel anymore though, but rather as student housing for the students enrolled in the Academy of Film and Theatre. It was during this phase when Sismaju Hotel saw the tragedy that haunts it to this day. Nellie Bajan was a young student who was staying here during her time in school. The semester had come to an end though, and it was Christmas time when the incident happened. She was one of the only students who didn't go home for Christmas and instead decided to stay in her dorm. One evening she was walking down the hall, and due to some of the lights being out, she stepped into the elevator shaft where there was no elevator waiting for her. She fell down several stories and landed at the bottom of the shaft, writhing in agony. She didn't die immediately though. In fact, it took her over 3 hours to finally die from her wounds. 3 hours where she was screaming and yelling for help, but nobody could hear her because they were all home for Christmas. Now her spirit haunts this place, and many students have reported hearing cries for help coming from nowhere. Some have seen her ghost standing at the end of the hallway, looking as if she's desperate for someone's attention. The sad thing about this is that if it would have happened at any other time when students were in the building, she likely would have been saved and never would have died at all. Just a horrible tragedy that's left its mark on this hotel for good. Number 4 on this list is the Witch's Pond. So this is a bit of a weird one. The Witch's Pond is a very small collection of water in the Boldu Cristaica forest that's said to be haunted. A few legends have come from this place. The first one, which I don't actually think is true, but I'm going to tell you guys anyways, is that Vlad the Impaler was decapitated here. Now it could be possible that this did happen. The truth behind Vlad's death has been debated for centuries, but I find it unlikely that the killers would take him out to this pond in this forest and do it out here. The second legend, which I think is far more likely and probably did actually happen, is that a witch was killed here. An article on the subject writes, as the legend goes, 18th century villagers put a witch to death in the woods near a swampy pond in colonial era cemetery of Aquia Creek. Her name, it said, was Edith, and her body was tossed into the water. This killing is how the pond got its name, the Witch's Pond. After she was killed, strange occurrences started happening here that couldn't be explained. It said that the water turns blood red in the springtime, and sometimes people see a witch-like figure hovering over this bloody liquid. In other reports, there's a sacrificial altar that's spawned here, and she's standing by it waiting to sacrifice sacrifice someone. The sound of bodies being thrown into the pond along with a witch's cackle can be heard ringing throughout the forest. Locals avoid this pond, and you should too. Also, if you think about it, it's just a small pond, so I don't really know why you'd be going there anyways. Number 3 on this list is Julia Hesdu Castle. Bogdan Hesdu was a Romanian intellectual who was very wealthy at the end of the 18th century. Bogdan, even though he put lots of effort into his work and business, put the most of his time into his daughter. Julia Hesdu was his daughter, and in Bogdan's eyes could do no wrong. That's why when she passed very unexpectedly at the age of 19, Bogdan fell into a deep depression. While she was alive, she was rather remarkable. In her early teens, she knew 7 languages and had already graduated several prestigious schools for piano and vocals. She apparently excelled at her schooling as well and was set to have a very fruitful life if she hadn't been taken too early due to tuberculosis. Bogdan, as I mentioned, didn't respond super well to this and reacted by building the Julia Hesdu Castle. Little did he know that it was going to be haunted. Apparently he partook in spiritism sessions with people who were trained in reaching out to the dead. In these sessions he would communicate with his daughter's ghost, and she would tell him how she wanted her castle to be constructed. This is how it was built, and everything that he decided to do and tell the architect apparently came directly from the ghost of his daughter. Her ghost didn't just leave things be when this castle was finished though. In fact, she fully took up residence here. It's said that the ghost of this girl can be spotted walking throughout the halls of this castle very often. Many people report hearing the sound of a piano playing, assumingly at the hands of this ghost. What's even creepier though is that this piano playing will instantly be followed by the applause of her dead father. Also, this castle has several rooms specifically made for spiritual rituals and also an area to worship Satan. From what I've heard, the ghost here isn't particularly dangerous in nature, but it still sounds like one of the creepier spots in the whole country. Number 2 on this list is Poenari Fortress. This fortress has been riddled with death and destruction ever since it was first built. Even though in the first part of this series we talked about Dracula's castle, this is the castle where Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Dracula's character, spent a large part of his time. It's said that he saw the ruins of a fortress here at the beginning of his rule and thought that it would be a great place for a stronghold. He enslaved his enemies and worked them around the clock to revive the fortress to its former glory. Many of them died due to the extensive labor and fatigue, and those who didn't were killed by being impaled. Now, it's said that some of their spirits haunt this place, but they aren't the only ghost that still lingers here. The most notable haunting of this place is actually done by Vlad the Impaler's wife. During Vlad's reign, this fortress fell under siege by his enemies. Vlad was able to escape the castle, but his wife wasn't so lucky. The castle was falling, and rather than get captured by the oncoming army, she decided to fling herself off of the castle walls over top of a cliff. Her body fell far and dropped into a river many hundreds of feet below. It's said that the river ran red with blood, and it was nicknamed the Lady's River following this. Her ghost now forever wanders around this castle restless. Some say that her soul can never find peace because she could never forgive her husband for abandoning her all those years ago. This is why locals say that she has it out for any married men that visit the castle. Although visiting this castle would definitely make for a fun day trip, it might just not be worth it. Number 1 on this list is Hoy Baciu Forest. Often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, this forest is on pretty much everyone's list when it comes to the most haunted forests in the world. It all started when in 1968 a military technician took a photo of the area and captured what looked to be a UFO hovering over top of the woods. An article from My Best Place writes, after this incident, other inexplicable events soon followed, including the disappearance of a shepherd and his 200 sheep which were never found again, and the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl who later reappeared 5 years later wearing the same clothes and without having aged even one day. There have also been many first-hand reports from people who have entered the forest only to come out with burns, severe rashes, headaches, and a high fever which they didn't have before. Some studies have revealed higher than usual radioactivity produced by natural uranium present in the subsoil. The part in that article about burns and rashes and other things is one of the most common reports described by the people who go here. It seems that everyone who enters into these woods leaves with some sort of trauma. Most of that trauma is mental though. Feelings of despair and depression are widely documented from pretty much everyone who steps foot into this forest. All of the numerous reports, the photographs, and the general lore around this place has to make it the most haunted spot in all of Romania. Definitely not a forest that I recommend going to if you're looking to get outdoors. Number 5 on this list is Trevale Forest. Located near the Romanian city Pitești, Trevale Forest has several ghostly legends surrounding it. Some of them are old and have been rumored for centuries, whereas others have only recently gained the public's attention. Wikipedia writes, "There's a legend about a maiden, daughter of a rich landowner who loved a poor servant of her father. Her father found a rich old man for her to marry, but during the wedding day she ran with the servant in the forest. Her father found them and killed her lover and then decapitated her. It's generally accepted that the two scary things about the forest are the decapitated ghost of the bride and the people going into the forest to do satanic rituals." So that's the old legend that circulates around this forest and has been talked about for several hundred years. It's currently unknown what satanic rituals were performed here and in what time, but many assume that this forest has seen its fair share of human sacrifices and that those killed here still restlessly wander the woods to this day. The more recent legend that started some odd 30 years ago was actually from a taxi driver. It's said that a taxi driver drove a woman out to these woods as she requested him to. Then as payment for the trip was given her wedding ring. He was told to wait for her there until she was done with her business, which was in a very creepy abandoned old building right outside of the forest. As he was waiting though, he fell asleep, and when he woke up he was no longer in the same place or in the same time. It was 10 years later that he woke up in a building close to where his car was initially parked. When he went back to his car, he discovered the wedding ring attached to a finger, and heard later that the woman he drove that day killed herself 10 years prior. I can't even imagine how jarring it would be to wake up in a different place 10 years later. Like most mornings I wake up, I'm already disoriented, but that would be another level for sure. Ever since this story came out, taxi drivers around Romania don't ever want to drive here or pick someone up from this forest. A decapitated lover, human sacrifices, and a woman who took her own life and has the ability to bend time. Yeah, this forest definitely makes the list for places to avoid. Number 4 on this list is Banffy Castle. Banffy Castle is a very nice castle located in the small village of Bolinda. It's called the Banffy Castle because the Banffy family are the ones who own it. Wikipedia writes, "Dubbed the Versailles of Transylvania, the castle is reportedly haunted by the ghost of a young servant who paid with his life because he revealed that his mistress deceived her husband." Another variant is that the place is haunted by the ghosts of those who died in Banffy during the Second World War, when the castle was converted by the Germans into a military hospital. Legend says that there were often seen sinister shadows that seemed to be some of the soldiers, while through walls were heard strange noises, groans, sounds of footsteps, or indistinct voices. Some personal reports from those who visited this castle before have talked about the first part of the legend. They've said that they've seen the ghost of a young man in his 20s dressed in rags and looking as if he just got beaten. This must have been the servant who revealed that secret about the mistress so many years prior. The one positive about this place is that, unlike some of the other entries on this list, it isn't life-threatening to go here. That being said, some people have said that after they visited this place, they felt an aura of bad juju surround them for a long time. Like this parasite of bad luck and bad energy that's latched on and won't let go. It's a beautiful castle on the outside, and I'm sure that it would be nice to visit, but probably not worth the risk when we're talking about ghost servants and decade-long bad luck. Number 3 on this list is Radovan Forest. In this particular forest, they had a pretty tragic event that happened back in the 1940s. There are multiple variations of the legend, but it all boils down to a bride who takes her own life. The first variation of the legend says that the bride came here and took her life after her husband was brutally murdered on the night of their wedding. The second one says that she took her own life before her wedding after a local business owner had their way with her without her consent. Regardless of what led to her taking her own life, she did, and it's now thought by the locals that her spirit haunts this forest and is quite dangerous. A road runs on one side of the forest, and people who drive on it are told to hit the gas pedal and get through it as fast as possible. Apparently, this woman will appear on the side of the road and through some means have a car stop. Then she'll convince the driver to come out and follow her into the woods, maybe because she's in danger or because she promised them something once they get in there. Once they've gone deep enough into the forest though, where the road is almost out of view, is when she'll strike. No one who's gotten out of their car to help this woman has ever come back from that forest and is lost to the woods forever. Also, to add some fuel to this legend, there's a lake in the forest that's claimed dozens of lives over the years. Majority of those that have perished here are men as well, which fuels the narrative of
of how she died. If you happen to be passing by this forest, then do as the locals suggest and gun it down the road. At the end of the day, a speeding ticket is better than a torturous death from a ghost. Number 2 on this list is the House of the Devil. This is your classic tale of a worn out and degraded home that's now haunted. Located on General Propagescu Street in Bucharest, this house has one of the strangest looking exteriors I've ever seen. It's almost 100% covered in ivy with just tiny spots of the actual home being able to be seen. This really gives off a foreboding sensation and fuels the narrative that something sinister is happening inside the home, hidden from the public's view. A user who's nicknamed himself Dracula has written on a site detailing Romania's most haunted spots that during the interwar period, a man killed here 2 women and a 3rd woman took her own life. Also, some say that on nights with a full moon on one side of the house, you can see the number 666, a symbol of the devil, and here would live a demonic entity full of hate and anger that can be felt from afar. The number 666 showing up is why this home has been named the House of the Devil. Potentially, the demon that haunts this home possessed that one man who killed the 2 women and forced him to do it. Or maybe the sadistic actions of this man are what summoned the demon in the first place. Either way, it's abundantly clear by looking at this house from the road that it's not the sort of place you want to mess around with. People have said that they feel scared walking by the home as if somebody's watching them. Just that foreboding feeling of a dark spirit or aura in their vicinity wanting to strike. Avoid this house at all costs if you ever find yourself in Bucharest. Number 1 on this list is Cafluega Fresca Forest. Yep, that's right guys. Another forest has made the list. Something clearly needs to be up with these Romanian trees that just makes people act crazy, because this is actually getting a little bit ridiculous. Honestly, this one sounds like something directly from a movie or a video game too. Apparently the forest in question has a curse that hangs over it. This curse shouldn't be detrimental to you or to me, but those that have been cursed by this place are probably not the type of individuals that you'd want to have a run-in with. Several hundred years ago, a monastery was in this forest and it housed a bunch of monks. These monks minded their own business and didn't cause any problems for anyone, but were still senselessly murdered by an army of Turks that was raiding the area. Right before the last monk died though, he made sure to put a curse on everyone who participated in the spilling of blood of his fallen friends. The curse made it so that after these men had died, the ones who murdered the monks, their spirits came back to the forest and are forever stuck in this purgatory state in the confines of these woods. Similarly to the scene in the 3rd Lord of the Rings where Aragorn visits the ghost army in the mountains, this is kind of the same thing but in a forest instead. There's only one safe spot in this entire forest, and it's by a white cross that has remained from the monastery in the center of the woods. I don't like my chances against an army of the living, but I especially don't like my chances against an army of the dead. Not a forest that I recommend going if you want to make it out with your life.